flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty, justice for all.
Thank you, Vice President Gates. Welcome, everyone. We're glad you made it here safely. You know, the weather and the roads have been a bit foreboding tonight, so we're glad that you could join us. Also want to take a moment and welcome everybody who is joining us via our live YouTube feed. Thank you for spending your Monday nights with us. We'll call this meeting to order, this being the January 24th meeting of the Penn-Harris-Madison Board of School Trustees, and I'll turn it over to Mrs. Gates.
President Riley, at this time, the board would like to recognize you for your service and leadership you have shown this past year. It's been a long one. As board president, we appreciate your dedication, your hard work, the many, many hours, phone calls. On behalf of the board, we would like to show our gratitude by presenting you with this engraved gavel plaque.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. It probably all needs to be gold and worth a lot more after the last year. So thank you so much.
I appreciate you enormously, Mrs. Gates. I also want to take this moment to recognize somebody who didn't get a gavel, but in every respect deserves it. Vice President Beeler, now former Vice President Beeler, served every year with me for the last 3 or 4 years as Vice President, has done an absolutely outstanding job and an absolutely outstanding member of this school board. So if you would please join me in giving him a hand of applause. The first item on our agenda is the adoption of the agenda. Board members, do you have any additions or changes to tonight's proposed agenda? Hearing none, administration?
The administration has no changes.
Do I have a motion to adopt the agenda for the Monday, January 24th, 2022 regular board meeting as presented?
I so move.
Second.
All those in favor vote aye.
Aye.
Any opposed vote nay. Motion carries by a vote of 7-0. Next up is the approval of the minutes. Board members, do you have any additions or changes to the minutes from the January 10th, 2022 executive session and regular board meeting? Administration.
The administration has no changes.
Then do I have a motion to approve the minutes from the January 10th, 2022 executive session and regular board meeting as presented?
I so move.
A second.
All those in favor vote aye.
Aye.
Any opposed vote nay. That motion also carries by a vote of 7-0. We'll move on to the superintendent's recognitions and announcements. Dr. Thacker.
Thank you, President Riley and Board of Trustees. Welcome, everyone. We're delighted to see you. I'm really delighted to welcome our outstanding student board ambassador from Penn High School, Manal Bush.
Good evening, President Riley, members of the board, and Dr. Thacker. Tonight, as always, I'll be sharing some athletic, academic, and fine arts highlights, as well as some Kingsman Court updates. So, in athletic news, our Penn boys wrestlers just won their NIC championship, along with 6 individual crowns. Our girls wrestlers also just won their state championship, making this their 5th win out of 6 seasons. Our girls swimmers just won their NIC championships with over a dozen blue ribbons and 10 new NIC records. In fine arts news, an astounding 18 students have earned Indiana All-State Band honors. 8 of them made the honors band and 4 made the All-State band. In academic news, this past weekend, we had a Penn debater, Amrita Kulkarni, who placed first in Indiana's Northwest District in moral and philosophy debate. And this was very exciting for our team because we have a very small team and we've never had a first in the district before. So this was a bit historic. And she's going to be competing in the national tournament this June in Louisville, Kentucky. I also thought it might be nice to get an update on our seniors college processes. This past month, most seniors received or heard back news from their early applications, and I thought I heard an abundance of wonderful news, so I thought I'd share. We have Stanford, Princeton, Oxford, and University of Chicago acceptances, Harvard, Vanderbilt, and Georgetown deferences, about 4 or 5 Notre Dame acceptances, and a plethora of Indiana University and Purdue Honors University acceptances as well. And I'll make sure to update on that after our regular decision pool in March. Moving on to Kingsman Court news, we have our annual Snowball Spirit Week coming up on the week of February 14th. February is also Black History Month, and we generally share information and posters celebrating past and present leaders and activists and history with the student body. We are also joining Penn's Dream Commission Society for their Noodles and Company restaurant give back on March 9th. I'm not sure how many of you remember our Chipotle give back from last year, but it's the same.
Oh, we remember.
It's the same exact concept. So there's nothing new. It's just Noodles and Company this year instead of Chipotle. We thought we'd give everybody a break. And it's the same concept. 1/3 of all of our sales made at the restaurant that day are going to go to the Logan Center this year, which assists adult and children with intellectual and just developmental disabilities. So that is all I have for you tonight. Thank you so much for your time.
Well, thank you, Manal. Thank you for all the good news. Wonderful to hear about our wrestlers, our swimmers. It was really great to hear about our 18 all-state band honors. I don't think that that's happened, at least during my time on the school board. Please pass along our congratulations to all of our Penn seniors who are moving on to post-secondary education. What terrific news. And congratulations to you yourself and all the honors that you've been recently receiving.
Thank you. I
Great to
appreciate
see
it.
you.
It's good to see you too.
We'll move on to our next item, Dr. Thacker.
Thank you, President Riley, the Board of Trustees. We're really excited to have this opportunity to put the spotlight on Walt Disney Elementary School. And so you can see the principal coming in, and Dr. Short is going to introduce this segment of the program.
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Thacker, President Riley, members of the board. It's my pleasure to welcome Mr. Ryan Towner, who is our principal at Walt Disney Elementary School. And since we are still having people come to us instead of the board going to schools for the time being, Mr. Towner is here to give us a snapshot of some of the exciting things that are happening at Walt Disney. So welcome, Mr. Towner.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Short, Dr. Thacker, President Riley, members of the board. Thank you for having me this evening to share some highlights from our school. So at Walt Disney, we have this saying, it's a great day to be a dolphin. And this evening, I'm going to be sharing some of our story, some short stories, if you will, that help paint a picture of what makes every day great. And so our first short story is that we're back. We're back together under one roof. These pictures were taken from the first day of school, and the joy on the students' faces speak for themselves. You'll remember this was at a time when we were mask optional. That wanted to share that bit. But, you know, just when I was looking through pictures and preparing for the presentation, the joy that you see in these students, and I remember being there, they were just thrilled. And we remain thrilled to be back together under one roof. Last year, approximately 1/3 of Walt Disney students participated in virtual learning. And, you know, staff and students alike gave a phenomenal effort. And of course, we know that the in-person learning environment is optimal. And so we're just so happy to have everyone together. And, you know, we tackle the impacts of COVID. It's really been a phenomenal highlight to our year. ENL, that's my next story to share with you. I put the comment, "We are the world." It's a little tough to see. And the picture with the students against the wall is, of course, a world map. And there's yarn going to every student and where they're from. And so we are presently, we're representing 5 continents, and we have 27 native languages represented among our ENL population. And so our ENL staff do a phenomenal job, and really their focus, to sum it up, a lot of what we do instructionally is to focus on content, vocabulary, and academic language, right? So we want to help students have the tools to get the most out of their classroom gen ed experience. Another story I'm really excited to share with you is the success we're having in interventions in our RTI programming. The 3 ladies on the left, Mrs. Betsy Allwine, Mrs. Emily Breeden in the middle, and then Mrs. Laura Utz on the right, are all new this year. So on, you know, Mrs. Utz and Mrs. Allwine are reading specialists, Mrs. Breeden are added interventionists. They're doing just phenomenal work, and we're really excited about this. So, you know, we, as the largest Title I school, we've always had intervention services. We've been able to expand that this year. And of course, with the impacts of COVID and such a
high percentage of students who are on virtual learning, there's a high demand for services. And so these interventionists, they work specifically with reading and math, and we use real specialized programming with the goal of each student reaching grade level. So this slide shows you just a quick snapshot of the number of students participating in services year over year. So the lighter blue color would be by grade level in the 2021 school year, and the dark blue representing this year. And so you can see that in each grade level, we're reaching many more students. Each of these students represents a need. They have an academic need. Without these services, reaching grade level would be a very questionable thing. So we're just delighted to have the support, to have our 3 interventionists. We currently have 119 students in some form of Tier 3 instruction for reading or math. And at this point, 27 students have made adequate progress to exit Tier 3 services. So that's very exciting. We know that the impact students have, and oftentimes getting to grade level, is a multi-year journey. And so at this point, to have 27 in this half year or so who are at a point where they've exited services and are to grade level is something we're thrilled about. So that is certainly a highlight at our school. The next story I'd like to share with you, one of our educators, this is her 30th year teaching 3rd grade at Walt Disney. And so this is Mrs. Mocht, and she was so kind in helping us to get an original copy from the 1992 yearbook. And Mrs. Mocht, well, first off, she's a great example that while fashionable hairstyles may change, the value of a great teacher does not. And so I tried to word that eloquently, but she has many just wonderful experiences. She forms really tight bonds with her students. And I can think of several students in my 5 years at Walt Disney where Mrs. Mock, she was that teacher for them. She was the teacher who basically helped them believe that they could succeed at school. And she does that by forming an outstanding sense of community in her classroom. And she builds very close bonds with her students. And I'm just so delighted to have Mrs. Mock as a core member of our faculty and to be here, to congratulate her in her 30th year teaching at Walt Disney. Certainly something that we're so grateful for. And, we're blessed in many ways. We've got great teachers all over. In every corner of the building, all grades and subjects, we have individuals who care very deeply for our students. Excellence is all around us. And these teachers, they really showcase the power of relationships and building rapport with students. And it creates this environment of positivity and just joy in celebrating the great things that are taking place in our classrooms. There's no doubt that these jobs aren't easy. And I just want to thank every teacher for their just never-ending dedication. A parent recently did share with me a very kind remark, and I wanted you to see and hear it. She says this: Disney is the reason we are in PHM. We appreciate the way Disney embraces all students, and the teachers give 110%. The teachers make the difference. I don't know when they sleep, and I've never seen these teachers do anything other than smile. Everyone just seems to step up and do extra. The staff is truly incredible. We are so thankful that our kids go there. And gosh, just what a beautiful tribute to the teachers and the awesome work they're doing. The last Disney story I'd like to share with you tonight is one of celebrating success. To the right, you see a collage there. Those are students receiving our Dolphin of the Quarter Award. We started that a few years ago. And, the purpose that every teacher, every 9 weeks, is identifying one student who just is exemplifying great citizenship, work ethic, is experiencing great growth or high achievement. And, of course, considering COVID, so what we do is we bring the celebration to them, and they get this yard sign that's theirs to keep and display, and they get a certificate, and then, of course, a letter from their teacher that shares how grateful the teacher is to have the student in their class. It is an absolute delight to drive around town and see Dolphin of the Quarter signs proudly displayed. I always point them out to my wife every time. We have, before I advance, some other successes I'd like to share. We have several PHM teachers who have received Education Foundation grants which we're extremely grateful for. One of our teachers, Mr. Davidson, was a Janine Arter Award winner. We also, a few years back, Miss Austin was a PHM Teacher of the Year. So we've had a lot of success with our students and teachers. And this picture, I love it. This shares like the reason for doing what we do. Each year, our Penn graduates have the opportunity to return to the elementary school they attended. Just an awesome initiative that Mr. Gallagher began. And watching them visit with former staff members, it's just a super joyful thing. This last year, we even had the added benefit of a dodgeball game between the first graders and the seniors. So we might have a new tradition in place. But it's just so neat to see these students come back and visit where they began prior to moving on to the next steps. A recent success we are celebrating is being named a best elementary school by U.S. News and World Report. You're aware that 13 PHM schools received this honor. It's a point of pride at Walt Disney. The majority of comparable Title I schools in our area did not receive this designation. And again, it points to the amazing work that our teachers and staff do each day. They're delivering very high quality instruction and they're meeting the needs of our students. So thank you again for this opportunity to share some of these short stories that tell our story at Walt Disney. I can assure you great things are happening every day at Walt Disney Elementary School. And at this time, I'd be delighted to answer your questions.
Thank you so much, Mr. Towner. Board members, any questions or comments for Mr. Towner?
Yeah, I'd just like to say that the things you've done there are pretty awesome. I can tell that you would probably be a good coach because you have great leadership and you get your people at your school to perform at a high level. And obviously make the students feel really good about themselves. And I think that's one thing as educators we have to do is we have to make kids successful. And you and your staff have been able to do that at Walt Disney. So I congratulate you.
Thank you, Mr. Garrett.
Mr. Towner, I just want to add that I remember when you were a student teacher. I think you might have taught JR.
Sure did.
As a student teacher. He's now a senior at Penn High School.
Thank you for sharing.
Well, listen, I can tell you, Dr. Thacker, I spotted talent. If you recall, I knew like I can't say I know the names if I remember any other student teachers, but Mr. Towner, I remember. Thank you. Thank you
Mrs.
for
Roach.
committing to these children. Thank you for committing to this profession. 27 different languages spoken at Disney. What a source of richness.
How many did you speak?
One.
Please extend our gratitude and celebration to everyone at Walt Disney and keep up the great work.
Thank you.
As you may know, Disney is very near and dear to my heart. I've lived within about a half mile of Disney for the better part of 25, 26 years. And hearing your presentation and seeing the slides just brought back so many wonderful memories, one of which is Mrs. Mocked. I love what you said when you said, I can think of several students who Mrs. Mock helped believe they could succeed. I can think of two myself, my son and my daughter. Please tell her very much our appreciation for everything that she does and has done for Disney. Please also extend our deepest appreciation for Mrs. Allwine and our new interventionist at Disney. Please also tell the rest of our teachers that the reason why Disney is best elementary school in U.S. News and World Report is because of every single thing that they're doing, embracing the challenges that they have, the unique challenges that they have at Disney. And it's also largely due to your leadership. It's been wonderful to see you come up through the advancement in administration in PHM, Mr. Towner. If only we could get you enthusiastic about your job. I'm totally kidding. Your enthusiasm is infectious. Your leadership is obvious. And it's for that reason that Disney is what it is. We look forward to seeing you at Culture Night.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Riley.
We'll move on to our next agenda item. Dr. Thacker.
Thank you, President Riley and Board of Trustees. Excuse me. The administration recommends approval of the Tim items appearing on the consent agenda as presented. Appearing on the personnel report of the certified staff is one retirement. Mary Nicolini, teacher at Penn High School, who will retire at the end of the 2021-2022 school year after 28 years of service with PHM and 35 years in teaching. And I can tell you, Mrs. Nicolini is a fabulous teacher. She was PHM Teacher of the Year, and she was a semifinalist for Indiana Teacher of the Year. Just a fantastic teacher. I'm so proud to call her a colleague and friend. Also appearing on the personnel report of the classified staff is one retirement. Laura Walker, teacher aide at North Point School, who retired effective January 20th, 2022 after 10 years of service. On behalf of the board and administration, we wish Mary and Laura the very best in their upcoming retirements.
Thank you, Dr. Thacker. Board members, any questions or comments about the consent agenda? Hearing none, do I have a motion to approve the January 24th, 2022 consent agenda as presented by Dr. Thacker?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor vote aye.
Aye.
Any opposed vote nay. Motion carries by a vote of 7-0. We'll move on to our next agenda item, which is the instruction reports on after-school tutoring. Dr. Thacker.
Thank you, President Riley and Board of Trustees. I'm so proud of the work that our teachers are doing and that they're involved with these motivated students and outstanding parents. We start thinking about accelerating the learning opportunities. This is something you're going to enjoy because they have a great after-school tutoring program. And Dr. Short is going to introduce this program.
Thank you, Dr. Thacker, President Riley, members of the board. It's my pleasure to welcome back Mr. Ryan Towner after a brief absence, as well as Ms. Betsy Allwine to join us this evening. They are going to highlight specifically what's happening at Walt Disney with our tutoring clubs, but we'll also give you a little bit of a flavor for district-wide what's happening with the tutoring program. So welcome.
Thank you, Dr. Short. Good evening, Dr. Thacker, President Riley, and board members. We're very excited to share with you about our tutoring clubs that are ongoing in our elementary schools and very recently have begun in our middle schools. So this slide gives a general overview. All of the instruction and tutoring is planned and implemented by teachers. Our goal is to accelerate learning and to provide additional opportunities for students to master the essential skills. This is done in a small group instructional format, typically no larger than about 7 to 1. Formerly, tutoring was more or less a Title I initiative, only our 5 title schools, and it's now occurring in all elementary schools and middle schools. This slide shares with you the participation in our tutoring programs. This is just at the elementary. With our middle schools just recently starting, I was not able to have those numbers yet for you. But this shows our participation. So comparing the student population on the left and then the staff involvement on the right. Last year we had 177 students across our 5 elementaries who were able to do tutoring. This year we're now reaching 533 students. The teacher involvement, last year we had 25 teachers involved, and this year we have 90 teachers who are involved in after-school tutoring. And so I'm excited to have one of these teachers joining me and presenting this evening. Please come. This is Betsy Allwine. She's a reading specialist at Walt Disney and works with our 5th grade tutoring groups. Miss Allwine is a new face in our boardroom. She previously was a 6th grade teacher and 5th and 6th grade interventionist in a neighboring school corporation. And just every day, I'm so grateful to our HR department who helped me in recruiting her over to Walt Disney because she is doing an amazing job. So Mrs. Allwine will share more detailed information about the structure and the student experience of our tutoring program.
Thank you, Mr. Towner. Today, I want to share how PHM's tutoring process provides for student growth through highly impactful tutoring. Our elementary school's tutoring mirrors what the National Student Support Accelerator model shows as being highly effective. From providing consistent, well-supported tutors to our school data to drive instruction, as well as providing high-quality materials to aid in learning, these components are what make our tutoring program effective, and embedding this program in our school allows for more students to participate. The first component of our tutoring program that allows it to be highly impactful is our tutors. Effective tutoring is based on strong tutor-student relationships. Our tutors are our teachers who know our students and are well-skilled at relationship building and knowledgeable of the content they are helping our students to learn. The next component that makes our tutoring program highly impactful is data. Using our data to inform our tutoring sessions. Dibble's data, as well as ClearSight, helps our teacher tutors understand our students' strengths and provides insights into areas of student improvement. Data is used to determine who would most benefit from the tutoring program and evaluate the effectiveness of the tutoring to inform if changes are needed to improve student learning. The effectiveness of our program also lies with the instruction that is provided. Teachers use high-quality materials that are aligned with state standards. At Walt Disney, teacher tutors utilize many of the high-quality materials that the corporation has provided for us, aligning these materials with the Tier 1 instructional curriculums, such as Reading Street and Everyday Math. For example, in my tutoring group, for reading, I look for articles from Raz Kids that mirror those from Reading Street. Not only are the materials being used by teachers for the tutoring groups aligned with the state standards, but they're also then able to be aligned with the instruction happening in the classroom day to day. The final component that I want to address is how the tutoring program is integrated into the overall learning of the student. The program is implemented directly after the school day. This creates a greater likelihood of student participation and helps to reach the students who need it the most. It reduces barriers from attendance and doesn't require missing extracurricular activities such as clubs. Some of the students that I work with also participate in the Circle the State singing program. And so they're able to participate in that as well as my tutoring group. And I think it's just so exciting to see how PHM is able to support our students' talents as well as their academic needs in such an effective and highly impactful way.
Well, thank you, everyone. At this time, we're very happy to answer your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Tanner, Ms. Allwine. Board members, any questions, comments?
I have a question. You mentioned that this is going on now in all of our elementary schools. So all of our elementary schools have after-school tutoring sessions?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yes.
For targeted students that are targeted by their teachers and using the clear assessment?
Yeah, typically based on classroom assessment and you know what the teacher understands to be needs, we invite students, and then that way that helps the numbers to be very manageable.
Are we targeting specific grades for this, or is this open to all grades?
In years past, we would target more of the intermediate grades 3, 4, 5. My understanding is the majority of the schools are offering kindergarten through 5th grade, and then our middle schools this last week began offering tutoring as well.
Just to be clear, I made an inference that generally it's our lead teachers that are serving as after-school tutors.
Yes,
For the most part?
Yeah, yes, all of them are teachers. There are circumstances, you know, Mrs. Allwine, for example, is a reading specialist, so she works with really all grade levels, but then for tutoring particularly works with the 5th graders.
I think the continuity between knowing the child in the natural context during the day and being able to take that wealth of knowledge, extend the school day, right? So that they're not just making adequate yearly progress, but they're actually starting to get ahead, make up some of those deficits if they exist. This is, I don't think I'm more excited about any of our ESSER funding than I am about this. So thank you. And just to confirm, ESSER funding will support this.
That is correct.
Mr. Turnwell?
Perhaps that's where my question is going to be targeted at, just in understanding. So last school year, 25 teachers were involved in tutoring. This year, 90. I always tutored in math, so I'm not always good at this, but that's a differential of 65, if I did that correctly. So obviously there are 15 new interventionists, one at each building. So that gives me 50 people that are new this year to tutoring. What changed between last school year and this school year that increased the amount of students, or not increase the amount of teachers, which also means more students that we can serve?
Sure. It is new funding coming available. In terms of the involvement, there are kind of two separate initiatives where our interventionists are working with students during the school day. And then our after-school tutoring program really can be any teacher. Majority of it would be grade level teachers who are participating, general education teachers, if you will. And so that's, as Mrs. Roach, Dr. Short noted, the increase, the ability of funds has allowed all schools to expand to being able to offer it, where prior to that, it was typically funded as part of our Title I grant.
That does lead me to another question. Eventually, God forbid, but eventually, these ESSER funds might run out. I'd be curious to know, not now, but as this progresses, what proves to be the most impactful of all of these interventions, right? If we were to choose to fund some of this stuff and find funds to be able to do it, where are we getting the most bang for our buck in terms of student progress, student growth, and success? So that's a long-term question to think about. That's a question I'll be asking in the months ahead.
We will be happy to look for that.
It's a good question to ask, good problem to have. Yeah.
Other questions, comments?
Oh, yeah, a couple. We have the interventionists during the day. Now, are a lot of those same students who receive intervention during the day, are a lot of those same students getting the tutoring after school?
I would say not necessarily. Some of the students who are in my tutoring group are students who either I or one of the other interventionists see during the day. But it's also some of the students who haven't quite mastered all of those skills that they're working on, but maybe aren't severe enough that they qualify for our intervention services. So tutoring is a nice way to be able to address the needs of those kiddos.
So tutoring is not for everybody. It's just for select students who have been targeted or have been isolated
Based
or
on
known that they
Yep,
need
based
help.
on need.
Okay. So in other words, if it's not like a kid wants to get better at advanced chemistry or whatever. Okay.
Correct.
And these people are paid. Is there any look at toward getting any like others, maybe volunteers, high school students who are going to be going into teaching or anything like that? Is there any effort or any thought process about using students like that to help out with the tutoring as well? I mean, because if you were, if you're going to be a teacher, what a great idea would it be to help out and learn a little bit about teaching and tutoring, while you're still in school? Has that ever come up in discussion or?
Honestly, I'm not certain if it has. It's something though that we would be happy to discuss or look into.
Especially since funds may eventually dry up, or some of it might dry up.
I think it's a good idea. I definitely think it's icing on the cake, and it's maybe cultivating a new crop of teachers. But I think what's really powerful about this is that the teacher who's been working with that child all day, who knows that child very well, who's already at the school, will definitely be there. All those different factors, I think, is what makes this model especially effective. So I'm happy our teachers are getting compensated for this, but I'm also grateful that they're willing to extend their own workday. I'm sure many of them are exhausted at the end of the day. So this is really a civic, student-oriented decision that they've all made. So.
These are great comments, and certainly I'm very, very proud of the work that you're doing. We look at Walt Disney, one of the best elementary schools in the country, and you're serving lots of ENL students, just doing marvelous work. The impact that you're having with the tutorial programs and the interventions during the school day are also supported by, I'm glad to say, some of the cadet teachers that we have from Penn High School, right, who become teachers. So we whet their appetites, and when maybe we can get them in that pipeline. So I know that we have lots of a lot of teachers, cadet teachers, who are involved in many extracurricular activities. Probably some of those kids who are in this band of 18 being all state. But thank you so much for the great work you're doing. And we'll continue to explore and see how we can add more students and more volunteers.
Thank you very much.
You.
Well, Mr. Towner, thank you again so much for being here tonight. Ms. Allwine, it's wonderful to meet you. Welcome to PHM. Thanks for all that both of you are doing. Look forward to seeing you soon. We'll move on to our next item, which is business operational services capital improvement projects. Dr. Thacker.
Thank you, President Riley and Board of Trustees. Our Chief Operating Officer, Mr. Aaron Linsky, is going to share a request for approval to award bids for several capital improvement projects. Mr. Linsky?
Thank you, Dr. Thacker. Good evening, President Riley, members of the board. Happy to be here tonight. This evening, the administration requests your approval for 9 capital improvement projects. You've previously approved these projects for the scope of work in the 2021 and 2022 leases, and now the administration is ready to award these items. Bid tabulations, letter of recommendations, and the full scope of work was provided in your board packet. The first item is a change order at Penn High School for the weight room and science lab addition. The bulk of these improvements includes classroom technology and exterior safety items due to a change in the project's original scope. The total cost of these changes is $96,157 and will be paid out of the 2020 lease to Gibson Lewis LLC. The change order again was attached. The second item is for the replacement of 20 heat pumps at Schmucker Middle School. These are new units that will replace the remaining original Climate Master units in the south addition of the school that was done in the year 2000. Mr. Beeler, we're back to fixing what we put together back then. The school district will purchase these direct from the manufacturer and supply the units to a mechanical contractor for installation. We're going to bring the installation at a later date. The total price for the units is $74,400 and will be paid out of the 2019 lease to QAS Quality Applied Systems. QAS is the designated Climate Master provider for the entire state of Indiana. The third item is the replacement of the underground diesel tank at Grissom Middle School. The district will replace the underground tank that was installed in 1984 with an above ground system designed and specified by Schmidt Associates. Multiple bids were solicited, but only one was received. We did check with Schmidt Associates and they assured us that the bid appears to be good and in line with their budget for the design. Therefore, the administration recommends awarding to the lowest most responsive bidder, which was Allied Ott Petroleum Equipment, for a base bid of $326,000. The project will be paid out of the 2022 lease and the work will begin in spring. The fourth item is for masonry improvements at Elm Road and Prairie Vista Elementary Schools, Grissom Middle School, and Penn High School. Schmidt Associates received 3 bids for this work. The administration recommends awarding to the lowest most responsive bidder, Zykowski Construction, for a base bid of $210,643. The project will be paid out of the 2022 lease and work will begin this spring. Fifth item is for district-wide landscaping improvements. This will include work at Elm Road, L.C. Rogers, Horizon, Meadows Edge, Moran, North Point, Prairie Vista, Walt Disney Elementary Schools, Discovery, Grissom, and Schmucker Middle Schools. The focus this summer is to improve the aesthetics of the landscaping surrounding the main entrances at these schools and standardize our buildings with plants and shrubbery that meet the district's safety guidelines for crime prevention. Schmidt Associates received 4 bids. The administration recommends awarding to the lowest most responsive bidder, which was MAC Properties, with a base bid of $143,378.14. The project will be paid for out of the 2022 lease and work again will begin this spring. The sixth item for approval is for a parking lot expansion at Meadows Edge Elementary. This will add 48 additional spots, improve sidewalks, add site lighting, and improve drainage to meet the Indiana Department of Environmental Management, IDEM, requirements. Fanning Howard received 3 bids. The administration recommends awarding it to the lowest most responsive bidder, the Robert Henry Corporation, for a base bid of $300,300. This project will be paid out of the 2022 lease and work will begin when school gets out this June. The seventh item is for the Penn High School campus improvements. These improvements were identified back in the 2016 Schmidt facility assessment. The full scope of the improvements was provided in your board packet. This will include improvements such as utilities, fencing, walkways, bleacher improvements, and participant dugout structures at the junior varsity, softball and baseball fields, and additional bleacher installation at the varsity baseball field. Fanning Howard received 4 bids. The administration recommends awarding to the lowest most responsive bidder, which was Zykowski Construction, for a base bid of $894,780, and also approved alternates number 1 and number 2, which was upgrading the fencing to be PVC coated, which will give us a longer life, and number 3, elevated bleachers at the JV baseball field, for a total award of $1,140,180. The project would be paid out of the 2022 lease and work would begin when we get out in June. The 8th item is for a re-roof of the Support Services Center, the SSC. This is an overlay project similar to that we conducted at the metal roofs at Penn High School. Depending how we received 3 bids, the administration recommends awarding to the lowest most responsive bidder, Slate Tile Roofing and Sheet Metal, for a base bid of $358,925, and an alternate number 1 for an adhered membrane for $13,475 for a total award of $372,400. This will be paid out of 22 lease and will begin in late spring. All right, last but not least, item number 9 is for district-wide mechanical control improvements. The full scope of work has been provided in your board packet, but this will include installation of variable frequency drives, alarm points on sump pumps, and the replacement of pneumatic controls with digital controls. This work will be performed at Penn High School, Discovery Middle School, and Horizon Elementary. The administration respectfully requests approval to award the improvement contract for the district-wide control improvements with our current mechanical control provider, Precision Control Incorporated, for a total cost of $483,650. All work will be completed on a time and material basis and not to exceed these amounts. These improvements will be paid out of a combination of the 2019, 2020, and the 2021 leases. Be happy to answer any questions you may have. I also have Joe Winters available for any questions. Can you repeat that?
Mr. Linsky,
Yes, sir.
just to clarify,
Absolutely.
because I know it was a long list and you did a commendable job, but could you repeat on item 7
Sure.
what the base or total award was? Because what you might have said was different than what was in the packet. And I just want to see it.
Let me just verify with the item to make sure I didn't copy it over incorrectly, which certainly could have happened. Apologize.
So I had 1,038,065. Let me pull it up for you. You said 1,000,000.
The attached paperwork matches what you
Matches
not
what
what
I
you
have?
said, not what you said.
I'm sure I just transposed or changed by the time.
I think it was just an audible oops, but I
Sure.
want to make sure that we get it right.
That was item number 7.
Yes, it was.
The high school.
Should be $1,038,065. You are correct. Thank you. Apologize for that mistake.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, hearing none. There are 9 motions that I will present related to the capital building improvement projects bid quotation awards. We will only take 1 vote on the 9 motions. Do I have a motion to award the Penn High School Edition final change order to Gibson Lewis in the amount of $96,157? Award the heat pump equipment purchase to Quality Applied Systems in the amount of $74,400. Award the Grissom Middle School diesel tank replacement to Allied Aught Petroleum Equipment in the amount of $326,000. Award the district-wide masonry improvements to Zylowski Construction in the amount of $210,643. Award the district-wide landscaping improvements to MAC Property Services in the amount of $143,378.14. Award the Meadows Edge parking lot expansion to the Robert Henry Corporation in the amount of $300,300. Award the Penn High School campus improvements to Zylowski Construction in the amount of $1,038,065. Award the Support Services Center re-roofing project to Slate Tile Roofing and Sheet Metal in the amount of $372,400. And award the district-wide control improvements to Precision Control System, Inc. in the amount of $483,650.
I so move.
Second.
All those in favor vote aye.
Aye.
Any opposed vote nay. Motion carries by vote of 7-0. Thank you, Mr. Linsky. Don't go anywhere. Next up is approval of the contract for district-wide lawn and landscape maintenance. Dr. Thacker.
Thank you, President Riley, and Board of Trustees. You know, we want our facilities to look great all the time, and we have an outstanding group that we're working with. And so Mr. Linsky is going to share some details for the second business action item. Mr. Linsky.
Thank you, Dr. Thacker. Good evening once again, President Riley, members of the board. This evening, the administration requests your approval for the contract for our district-wide lawn and landscape maintenance. Since 2010, the district has outsourced these services. The previous contract stipulated that the district provide all equipment, which is mowers, trimmers, edgers, backpack blowers, trucks, trailers, and the fuel. In addition, we were responsible for the insurance, maintenance, and replacement, as well as storage of these items. The new contract places all these responsibilities on the approved contractor. In addition, Director of Facilities Joe Winters and his team have outlined increased expectations and responsibilities to ensure that our 500+ acres of property are adequately manicured and maintained. We believe that our school grounds play an important role in both the formal and informal learning systems as they offer outdoor educational environment that is accessible to our students on a daily basis. We did receive 4 bids for this work, and the administration recommends awarding to the lowest, most responsive bidder, MAC Properties, for a base bid of $382,160.60. This is a 1-year contract. It is paid out of the operations fund, and the work, if approved, would begin this spring.
Board members, any questions or comments for Mr. Linsky?
Yeah, I've got a couple. First of all, this company that we're getting, previously we had our own people do it, right? Or we
yeah,
just supplied the equipment, but we hired people to do it.
Yeah, it was a outsourced company previously.
But we owned the equipment and they just supplied the people.
That is true.
Right. And that, did you feel like we had a little bit more control over what was going on under that situation rather than we hire a corporation? Just because I know what happens, you know, at apartment complexes and stuff and whatever, they come in and their idea is to get it over as fast as they can, and they run their machines as fast as they can. And if it's wet, they make ruts all over the place. And I guess my point is this: I want to make sure, you know, I love our campus. We have a great looking campus, and I just want to make sure that we don't hire a company that's not going to take as good a care of our campus as, you know, our own employees would.
Yeah.
So I guess that's a concern that I have in moving to this type of a situation.
Absolutely. So they were not our employees. So we did run into that situation in the past. I would say our previous contractor did a wonderful job addressing our concerns. We meet with them often. The bidder, the low bidder, MAC Properties, they actually service all of Whirlpool. They're a very large company. They service the city of Niles. They can certainly handle our property. In fact, we're in a better situation because they are such a large company. They're able to meet our needs when in the past, because of multiple contracts, maybe our previous supplier wouldn't be able to cut our lawns as much as we'd expect or take care of them to the degree that we expect them to be taken care of. We have high expectations, and I promise you,
Good, that's a concern I have.
Joe Winters and his team are on these guys. In fact, you know, he's got a keen eye and attention to detail, and since he came on 3 years ago, we've done the best job ever on our property in terms of how it's kept. Our buildings seem very pleased.
I trust you, man.
Absolutely appreciate that.
Other questions or comments?
Mr. Linsky, so you mentioned previously that we supplied all the equipment. I didn't see anywhere in the contract, but I just want to confirm, we're not giving over any of that equipment as part of this contract, are we?
No, this is a 1-year agreement, so our current equipment we will hold on to until we make sure we're successful. If we are successful in the future, obviously we're going to have fewer pieces of equipment. We still maintain, this does not take care of all of our property. This takes care of a good majority of it, but we still maintain most of our fields and such, so that equipment will not go to waste. Great question.
Okay, do I have a motion to approve the contract with MAC Property Services for district-wide lawn and landscape maintenance in the amount of $382,160 as presented?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor vote aye.
Aye.
Any opposed vote nay. Motion carries by a vote of 7-0. Thank you again very much, Mr. Linsky. We'll now move on to our next business action item, which is adoption of a resolution to transfer amounts from the education fund. Dr. Thacker.
Thank you, President Riley, Board of Trustees. Executive Director of Business Services, Mr. Jerry Hawkins, will introduce this third business action item tonight. Mr. Hawkins?
Someone took them all.
I think I hear him.
I'll go look.
I think he's
Yep.
maybe. I thought he was coming downstairs. We'll probably
He's probably
delay.
watching it online. 90 seconds.
Oh, sorry. I forgot about the delay. My mistake. Okay, you have before you the presentation or the information related to the transfer for this year. And we're asking for that transfer amount to be done each month. I'm going to be happy to answer any questions. It is a slight increase over last year. It is basically to cover the accounts that, or the expenses that were transferred from the general fund to the operations fund in 2019. Any questions that you have for me?
All this information has been previously provided to the board. It's also in the board notes. Board members, do you have any questions or comments for Mr. Hawkins? Okay, hearing none, do I have a motion to approve the resolution of transfer amounts from the education fund to the operations fund for the months of January 2022 through December 2022 in the amount of $746,988 each month as presented?
I so move.
Second,
Second.
all those in favor vote aye.
Aye.
Any opposed vote nay. Motion carries by a vote of 7-0. You made it just in time.
My apologies for being slightly late.
Mr. Hawkins, are you going to be around later?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
We'll now move on to our next business discussion item for the night. Dr. Thacker.
Thank you, President Riley and Board of Trustees. This is the first reading of new or revisions to board bylaws policies. Neola representative, Mr. Ryan Snoddy, met with PHM Board Policy Committee on Wednesday, December 15th, 2021 to review this current update, volume 34, number 1. The Board Policy Committee includes Board Attorney Jeff Johnson, Board Policy Liaison Mr. Chris Riley, Richard Ramey, Rochelle Bradbury, and me. Following the committee's review, the revisions and additions have been processed in-house to the policies in the pre-adoption phase, which is what is being presented to the board tonight. We've scheduled 9 policies for a first reading this evening. These 9 policies are the first group being presented to the board for discussion and review from volume 34, number 1. They will return to the February 14th, 2022 board meeting for a second reading and adoption. Mr. Johnson will lead us in this discussion tonight. Mr. Johnson?
Thank you, Dr. Thacker, President Riley, and members of the school board. As Dr. Thacker indicated, there are proposed revisions to 9 policies scheduled for a first reading this evening. First, policies 2020 and 1550, employment of superintendent and employment of administrators in addition to the superintendent. The proposed revisions to these policies prohibit PHM from offering bonuses to the superintendent or any other administrator based upon a favorable outcome of a referendum. Next, policies 3120.08, 4120.08, and 8455, employment of personnel for extracurricular activities and coach training. The proposed revisions to these policies add the completion of a sudden cardiac arrest training course as a requirement for any head or assistant athletic coach, the marching band director, or the sponsor of an extracurricular activity which the Indiana Department of Education has determined has an increased risk of cardiac arrest. Next is policy 3220, staff evaluation. The proposed revision to this policy incorporates amendments to Indiana Code 3028 11.54 by removing the results of state student test assessment results as a component of teacher evaluations. Next, policy 5340.01, student concussions and sudden cardiac arrest. The proposed revision to this policy adds students participating in the marching band and those participating in an extracurricular activity which the Indiana Department of Education identifies as having an increased risk of cardiac arrest to now receive, excuse me, together with their parents, an information sheet on sudden cardiac arrest. An acknowledgement of receipt of the information sheet must be signed and maintained as a school record. Next, policy 5460, graduation requirements. The proposed revisions to this policy will require that no later than the completion of 8th grade, each student, in consultation with a school counselor, must have a graduation plan. This graduation plan must include a statement of intent to graduate from high school, an acknowledgement of the importance of good citizenship, school attendance, and diligent study habits, the subject and skill areas of interest to the student, and the post-secondary goals of the student aligned with the graduation pathway requirements. And the final policy this evening is policy 7450, property inventory. The proposed revisions to this policy establish a threshold of $5,000 for equipment to be included in the biannual inventory. Also, supplies whose value does not exceed $5,000 need not be inventoried. That completes the first reading this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. As the board's policy liaison, I'll remind the board that when the board evaluates proposed policies from Neola, we only advance for the board's consideration for a vote those policies that are required by law. If it's merely a suggested revision to a policy, it's not one that we typically advance for the board's consideration. These 9 policy revisions are required by law. So just bear that in mind as you're reviewing them. With that in mind, do board members have any questions or comments for Mr. Johnson? Okay. Well then, thank you, Dr. Thacker. Thank you, Mr. Johnson, for presenting this information to the board. The board will take action on these 9 policies at the February 14th, 2022 board meeting. We'll move on to our next business report item for the evening. Dr. Thacker.
Thank you, President Riley and Board of Trustees. The Department of Local Government Finance has certified the district's 2022 budget. Executive Director of Business Services, Mr. Jerry Hawkins, will present a brief report reviewing the 2022 budget order. Mr. Hawkins.
Thank you, Dr. Thacker. President Riley, members of the board, this time I am here on time, so. And the PowerPoint's working, so we're all set. Tonight, we're going to talk about our budget order for 2022 and just kind of give you some highlights of what transpired in that process. Tonight, we're going to talk about our assessed valuation, how that ended up, our appropriations or our budgets for those funds, our property tax levy, and our property tax rate. First of all, and I don't know if you can see that real well on the screen, but you can kind of get a feel for what our assessed value has done over the last number of years. I put a 2023 estimate, probably not good to pay much attention to that because I'm not a projectionist on what our assessed value is going to be. But I do have to have some numbers as I look at the budget going forward to get an idea of what budget is available, what kind of levy is available given the tax rates. So that's why that's there. You can see for 2022, we saw a 6.04% increase. This is the same information, only in a bar graph to kind of give you an idea of what's happened with the assessed value over the last number of years. By the way, as always, if you have any questions along the way, let me know. Otherwise, I'll just keep going. Here talks about the actual appropriations or the budget. As you can see, this is the education budget. 2019 was the first year we had an education budget. And then from there on, you can see the comparisons over the last number of years. This year, we're at $72,390,106, and that is a 3.29% increase over 2021. Oops, didn't wait long enough. Come on. Okay, is that the right one? Yep. This is the appropriations for the taxable funds. So we have 2 taxable funds, that's debt service and operations, and they're funded primarily by property tax. Also included in that, in their revenue for those funds are the like license excise, commercial vehicle excise, and financial institution tax. But primary funding for these 2 funds is property tax. And you can see here, this is the actual appropriation. So this is the budget that was approved by the DLGF in 2022 for $43,201,742. And you can see the increase, slight increase in both funds from 2021. Here is the history of the appropriations, so you can see what appropriations have done over the last number of years, historically, all the way back to 2012. Here is the actual levy. So the previous was the budget. This is now the levy, the actual dollars received from property taxes. So debt service is up slightly, well, 1.5, almost 1.6 million. And then operations is up only 700,000. Total increase is 2.3 million. So the levy didn't go up as much as the budget because we still had some funds left over, so to speak, from previous. So that's kind of how that works, is the budget won't always match your levy on any given year. Next slide is the historical, goes back to 2012 again to kind of give you an idea of what the levy has done. And you can see what the comparison is over the last number of years. Rates. Obviously, taxpayers care a lot about the rates. And you can see our tax rate is still, well, if you compare to most entities our size, you'll see that we have a very low tax rate. We have a very strong tax base, which helps us in our tax rate. We're very thankful for that. But you can see we have less than a 2-cent increase for over previous year. Questions so far? Nothing? Quiet group. I guess I keep going. Maybe I'm not going fast enough. Here's the historical on the tax rates. You can see all the way back to 2012 again. And you'll see the highest tax rate we've had in any recent years that I could find was 1.23 or $1.23 per 100 assessed value. That's in 2014. And our current rate is 93.87, 93 cents per $100 of assessed value, a 2.01% increase. To note that our 22 tax rate is 29 cents below what it was in 2014, and that's a 23.72% lower than it was in 2014. So again, I think it's a testament to what you as a school board have directed us to do and what we're doing with taxpayer dollars and maintaining a very reasonable tax rate given the needs that we have in our district. Here's a historical or a comparison to other school districts. This is 22 tax rates. So I was able to find tax rates for all these school districts. And as you can see, we are the second lowest tax rate of any school around us. Very much to be proud of. I guess to some extent in the sense that we are able to do so many good things for kids and still maintain a low tax rate. I don't personally think our goal is to have the lowest tax rate around. Our goal is to do good things for kids. And if we can do that with a low tax rate, I think that's a great plus for us. And you'll see most of those school districts, at least the top 4 school districts, all have referendums. And that's the reason their tax rate is so high. Elkhart did not pass their most recent referendum, therefore their tax rate is below ours. First time that I have found anywhere in history, or at least in recent years, that their tax rate was below us. They're the only district in the area that is below us. Basically, that's roughly a 2-county area, us, St. Joe County and Elkhart County. Now here's, be a little careful with this data because the date is 1920. One of the problems we have when they're changing the funding for 21, 22, so this is actually almost 2 years old, but that's because data has really lagged when they developed the new formula. And then they're still working on the adjustments for the first half of 2021-22 school year because of the enrollment and the question about if they're quarantined, are they considered virtual, all the different questions. So they don't have all that funding down. So this is a bit old, but it is the latest data I was able to find to compare us in a funding of the basic grant. So if you think of the funding for the education fund, it comes from the basic grant and then the complexity index. Well, actually now they're combining those two. We can't get the calculation separated from the complexity with the basic grant or the funding basics. So every school district gets the same dollar amount on one part. The complexity adds to that. This is the combination of those two. And this says that the funding on a per student basis of these different school districts varies between, I can hardly see it from here, 5680, 5880.
1,680.
5680 per student up to
866.
6866. So that difference is dealing with the complexity index, which has to do with the direct certifications within that school district. It's not just free and reduced lunch as it used to be. It's the direct certifications. And those direct certifications may be similar to your free and reduced lunch numbers, but they may not. They're always going to be a little lower because you'll have some who will fill out free and reduced lunch applications who are not direct certified. The bottom line here is we are very near the bottom in terms of our actual funding on a per student basis. And it's always important to understand that we're very near the bottom on the tax rate. We're very near the bottom on funding for the per student amount for the education fund. And the net of those two means we're doing some awesome things for kids without the funding dollars that some school districts get. So,
Mr. Hawkins.
yes.
Question on this. So if a student from Middlebury decided to choose PHM, that associated dollar amount would come with them versus, say, a student who came from South Bend? Like, do these ranges, when a student elects to choose an out-of-district school, do these different ranges come with them, or is it a flat amount?
It doesn't work that way, because what happens is wherever their school they came from got an average of those dollars. When they come here, we get what our average is, up or down. So it's not going to match dollar for dollar because it's an average amount. So let's say the student isn't a direct certified student, then our number is going to be lower potentially because we're not getting the complexity that comes with it. But it's, yeah, good question. I don't know if I answered it well enough or not. That makes
Oh,
sense?
I think I understood it.
Okay. Yeah.
Is there anything that we can be doing to increase the basic grant per student that we're receiving from the state?
Well, I mean, there's always things we can do to, as we have for many years, as Dr. Thacker has promoted, the idea of the fair funding and the idea that there should be more on the across the board for all school districts and less emphasis on the complexity. You know, it kind of depends on the philosophy. If you're in a school district that has high need and high complexity, they're going to say you're taking money away from us. So, you know, from our perspective, we want as much on the baseline amount as we can.
You mentioned that some students aren't direct certified.
Mhm.
Is that because paperwork isn't being filled out, or is that because whatever metric they're using to be identified qualifies for one and not the other?
Could be both. Primarily, I mean, we have no part of direct certification except getting notified when someone is. So we can't fill out paperwork for them. We can't do anything for them. That's a direct certification. So I'll use an example. There are some people who feel that completing that information is giving too much information to the government. So therefore, they will not do that. But they might complete a form that we would have because they might trust us to say, okay, I'll do that and get free lunches because I do qualify, but I'm not willing to directly certify with the government. So, you know, that's an example. There's different philosophies on that, but it's primarily, it's done by the parents. They certify or complete an application, one or the other, to count. That, yeah.
On these basic grant amounts, I know this is a little bit of historic information, but are they closer than this range, right, between top and bottom is roughly $1,000 per student if you can't see the numbers. Is that a closer margin than it has been historically, or is this margin in the complexity side of things getting wider?
If you go back a few years, it is significantly closer. They changed the complexity calculation and reduced the funding of that calculation or made it stricter or harder to get and increase the foundation or whatever whatever you want to call it. So yes, it has gotten closer it hasn't changed a lot over the last probably 2 years, 3 years, because we're in our first year of the new biennium. So I would say it's probably been, is it 3 or 5 years? I would say that when they changed that complexity, it's probably been 5 years, hasn't it? When they significantly made a change in the funding formula. And it's kind of stayed pretty close to that the last few years.
Mr. Hoffman, if I could add to that, there used to be a real discrepancy between the foundation base from Penn-Harris-Madison and the state average. We were $344 below the state average. And so when I got here and the board commissioned me to head a task force, and we used lots of community members. In fact, a number of you positives participate in that. So that very first year, they actually changed the complexity factor and increased the base. And we kept working at that. And then probably about 5 years ago, we really made a breakthrough when they really reallocated some resources so that more people had that foundation. And so, $344 would be about $3.3 million for us, which is a lot of money. So we benefited from that, and we keep working at it. This is not a budget year, but we always talk to our legislators about doing things that, Families for Fair funding, and certainly we want everybody to have an opportunity for appropriate funding with the complexity. We benefit from the complexity also because we have more students on free lunch now than we used to. Probably 17 years ago, it was closer to single digit or 10% free lunch, and now we have over 20%. So that's how part of ours has changed.
Good point. Any other questions on this? So in summary, we will continue to use our GOBs and leases and common school loans for our building improvements and technology needs. We will, the assessed value increased by 6.04%, as I said before, levy increased by 8.17%, and tax rate by 2.01%. We're the second lowest tax rate in the area, lowest in the county, and we will continue to do great things within the resources that we have. So that's a real quick update on our 2022 budget. I could talk forever about budgets and dollars and all those things and love to get in the weeds, but I try not to unless you ask questions. So anything for me?
Board members, any other questions for Mr. Hawkins?
I have a question, but it's unrelated. I was going to ask you after this, when we get the board just to talk.
You want to save it for the board reports and requests?
That's what it's related to. I didn't want to enter because this has nothing to do with this.
Yep, that's fine. Well, Mr. Hawkins, the numbers speak for themselves, even though you made them simplified for us. They are nonetheless clear. When you look at the tax rates in 2022 versus 2014, the fact that we're the second lowest tax rate in the area, and the fact that per student we receive such little money compared to our neighboring school district, it really does speak volumes as to the visionary work that you have done, the administration has done. I commend you both. It's always wonderful to see you. Thank you so much for everything you're doing. And we look forward to seeing you again soon.
Okay, thank you very much.
We'll move on to our next business report item for the evening, which is a safety and security mid-year report. Dr. Thacker.
Thank you, President Riley and Board of Trustees. I'm really excited about the Safety and Security Mid-Year Report. Tonight we have an update, and Mr. Mike Sager, Director of Safety and Student Services, will be making this presentation. And I'm positive to say this, but I want to make sure that I say it. Penn-Harris-Madison is ranked number 6 in the nation by Security Magazine. And we're really proud of that. It really takes a lot of people. We talk about that triangle. We have students, teachers, parents, all working hard to make sure that we're safe. There's not just one element. And we have great leadership. Mike Sager has been recognized as one of the most influential safety experts in the entire country, one of the top 17. And he received a Gov 30 award, which would be 30 across the country, receiving that for safety at the White House, both of those in the White House. So I'll turn this over to Mr. Linsky, and he'll add a bit.
Thank you, Dr. Thacker. Good evening, President Riley, members of the board. Dr. Thacker did a wonderful job introducing Mike Sager. He is recognized statewide and nationwide for his services in security. So he could, trust me, he could give a 8 to 10 hour dissertation on safety and security, but we're just going to give you a brief update on the great things that are happening here at Penn-Harris-Madison.
Thank you, Mr. Polinsky, Dr. Thacker, President Riley, members of the board. Thank you for having me once again. I appreciate following up a budget session with a safety session. So it's always good to be here. I'd like to provide you with an update, and I'm trying to be as transparent as I possibly can in all of the areas related to safety, security, and student services within our Penn-Harris-Madison School Corporation. We'll be looking at weapons, we'll be looking at arrests, gang activity, threat assessments, school helpline, child protective services reports, student suicidal ideations, drug testing results, and then focus this year a little bit on drug education. Initially, as you can see, this year I want to point out that our 21-22 school year is for the first semester, whereas the others are for the entire year. So we are trending upward in the area of weapons in our schools. However, I want you to know that none of these weapons that we've recovered are followed by a targeted threat of violence. And the majority of our weapons are toy guns and knives that we find in our elementary schools. So this year, although we're trending upward slightly for the year, these weapons in our schools are not met with intention or targeted violence. So I think that was important to note. Students at elementary schools are bringing their Cub Scout knives to school. They're bringing their play toy guns, things of that nature so far this year. Okay. As we move on to arrests, I'm happy to say that our student arrests throughout our district are at a minimal. We see one so far this year versus one for the entire year last year, and so on. So arrests continue to be at a minimal, which is a great thing. The next category is criminal organization activity or gang activity. Very happy to say that of our schools in the past 2 years, we've had no gang reported activity. The activity that we saw in 2018 or 2019 was at our high school, and I can honestly say the high school immediately addresses those matters based on state law. If we have any gang-related activity, it's immediately investigated, and the board's notified of a full investigation within 10 days. So I'm happy to say our gang activity in our schools or our four walls are nil to none at this point in time, for the last couple of years, I should say. Transient and boundary probing threats, or just talking about threats in general, I could go on and on about, but I want to give you a framework as to what we have in place here at Penn-Harris-Madison schools. We categorize our threats as transient or boundary probing or substantive or serious threats. The vast majority of our threats are transient in nature or boundary probing. These are students spouting off, saying things they shouldn't say, or most recently using social media to extend threats. And those all threats are investigated. Each school has a threat assessment team spearheaded by that school administrator and other professionals within that building. We also have a district threat assessment team with multi-denominational staff and disciplinary staff, including mental health experts, exceptional education, psychologists. Our school resource officer, Mr. Teeter's a part of that. So we have a group that's district-wide that supports our threat assessment teams in our buildings. All threats in PHM schools are assessed. We use a Virginia model assessment, and it's kind of a combination between a Nicoletti-Flater assessment and a Virginia model. We have that online, and all of our administrators know that if any threat is issued, is immediately addressed, evaluated, and categorized as either a transient boundary probing or a substantive serious threat. In the past 8 years, we have trained our staff, our administrative, our leadership team in the area of threat assessments. We've had Nicoletti-Flater associates come in and evaluate our threat assessment process to determine if we are conducting best practices. We've also had them interview and train our leadership team in the area of threat assessments and conducting threat assessments. Prior to that, we had the Federal Readiness and Emergency Management Group, REM, address on-campus threat assessments. We've also had Sigma Threat Management Group come in and address our staff in the area of student threats. And we've also had the Federal Safe Schools Initiative training come in and talk about active shooting and threats. So over the years, we've provided a number of training opportunities for our staff in the area of threat assessments. We do take it extremely seriously, assessing all student threats from K through 12 since 2014. We have that data, we have it available, we review it, we share that data with our district threat assessment team. We try to get in front of these threats or students to try to identify who may or who may not act out. And as you can see, these are some of the numbers that we see in the area of assessing our threats. Okay, moving on. Safe School Helpline and categories. These are some categories that that we receive our Safe School Helpline calls. So the Safe School Helpline is a third-party service. This service services our entire community so that the community, the parents, the teachers, the students, everybody in our community contributes to our culture of safety in our community. That's my goal, that everybody participates. And how do you participate? You participate if you see something, you say something. You call the Safe School Helpline. You call your school principal. You call me. Any call that is sent to the Safe School Helpline, whether it be a phone call, a text, or an email, comes directly to me. If I'm not available, Mr. Linsky answers that call. If he's not available, Mr. Williams at the high school answers that call. And if he's not available, Dr. Sears answers that call. We are available, one of us is available to answer that call at all times. If it's a critical call, such as a suicidal ideation, a student is contemplating suicide, which I automatically get a phone call directly, then we immediately reach out to the school principal and that family to make sure that student's okay. If we can't reach that family, we will call for a person check with the St. Joe County Police and send an officer to that address to make sure that student is all right. But those issues, as well as threats, are taken seriously and responded to immediately. Again, the community can text information to the Safe School Helpline. They can email that information, or they can call that information in. As you can see, this year so far, we are trending higher in the area of calls and information received, which is a good thing. The more calls, the better. So I'm glad to see we're trending upward in the way of communication throughout our community and sharing information that they feel is worthy of communicating as it relates to school safety. This is just some information on a pie chart on our top categories. Harassment, bullying, we get a lot of calls, a lot of information related to particular student incidents. Health and safety at 15%, and then substance use or drug related at 8%. This just gives you an idea how things fall out for this semester, this past semester.
I'm just trying to correlate the colors with the pie chart. What is self-harm? Is that the 7.6?
A color
It
response.
should be color response. Because health and safety, like it tracks with the red being administrative, then bullying, color response, health safety.
Oh,
So that
Run the clock
7.6 should be the self-harm one.
Yes, I believe you are correct at that.
so 7.6 is self-harm?
Right.
Okay.
So those are the suicidal ideation calls that we get. If I don't answer, Aaron's answering, and we immediately respond to those. So that would be the self-harm category. Okay.
Do you break it down versus voice calls or text? Is it pretty?
I don't have that data. I'd be happy to get that for you. But yeah, our third-party service would be able to break that out as far as what they're receiving. But that's not a category that I have on top of my head. The majority of use these days are texting. And that's something that we're fully aware of, but I don't know how that is broken out.
Maybe a suggestion is look at, instead of calling it a helpline, maybe it's a help text. Alert to that group more, and they understand that a little.
Yeah, no, I agree. We try to promote the Safe School Helpline on the district website and also on the communication boards at the schools, particularly the high school. As you walk through, you see on the monitors, you'll see all these different ways which you can communicate, and it's confidential. Sometimes they'll provide their name information, other times they won't. Sometimes we have to figure out what they're talking about. They don't give us enough information. But the third-party service does have an opportunity sometimes to reach back out, although it's confidential, to try to gather more information for us. In the student services category, child protective service reports. We make sure that all of our staff, everyone in our buildings is aware that it's their duty to report student neglect and abuse. It's not, oh, hey, I told somebody. That does not fly. It's everyone's responsibility to call 800-800-5556 and report that. Now, I'm happy to say they're reporting quite a bit. We are similar to last year in our Child Protective Services reports. But if you look at last year, 363, and you consider the fact that a lot of our kids were home a good majority of that year, it is a challenge year and one that was new and different to our teachers who were doing virtual learning. They were basically in their students' homes, seeing things that they shouldn't see or otherwise. So I'm sure that led to a few more reports, being the fact that they're seeing inside that student's home. Quite interesting, some of the things they reported, but nonetheless, we're still trending similar to last year. And we continue to report and remind our staff, for the benefit of all of our students, report it to CPS. And then I've created a series of reports for CPS, for suicidal ideation, for threats, for a number of other things that when we report it to CPS, for example, we also fill out a form and we report it to our own administrative group and professionals. including our resource officers that get all these reports, our mental health people, and our administration. So it's not just, you know, in a vacuum. It is shared for the benefit of that student. If there's something there that an officer needs to look into further, then he has the availability to do that in reading these type of reports. Moving on to suicide ideations, we are trending higher, which is a scary thought. Indiana's always been one of the higher states in the area of suicides. Looking recently, we've fallen down, which is a good thing. We're not on the upper echelon of suicides throughout the country anymore. But our suicide ideations, students talking about suicide, sharing with their friends, other types of things at that 7.6%. Those are things we take exceptionally seriously. We've had a number of suicides since I've been here, and it's very unsettling, and it's something we can do something about. Dr. Sears works very closely in this area. Anytime there's a suicidal ideation, we inform Dr. Sears so she can provide the appropriate follow-up, whether it be lifelines, information, or providing a rating, doing a Columbia rating scale based on the individual, or if need be, a referral to Epworth or Oaklawn, depending on the student and the situation. So we do take that exceptionally seriously. But the numbers are a little scary in that they are trending upward. Okay, let's talk a little bit about student drug testing. We do test our secondary school students in the area of drugs, whether it be random testing or reasonable suspicion. So as you can see in this chart, the vast majority of our drug testing at the secondary schools is random drug testing. We do so many at the high school, we do so many a week at the middle schools. We continue to do that. And I do want to say something in regards to our nurses. I think our school nurses are doing a fantastic job, and we are taxing them. Every time I go in and talk to them about this, I'll get to it, but they're dealing with COVID issues and all kinds of things. And so I do just want to say that the nurses are doing fantastic work in our health departments. But random is the vast majority, of course, it should be, as well as reasonable suspicion. Waiver is when an individual is suspended and has been brought back on a waiver, and as a part of that waiver, they're required to do a drug test. And so that's what it means by a waiver. Now, looking at drug testing and drug prevention, one of the things that we've done at our high school this year is we've incorporated fly-sense vape detection in the restrooms at our high school. I can tell you these vape detectors are extremely accurate. The bottom of the screen is an example of what the detector looks like. At the top of the screen, we also use what's called a swab tech test kit to determine if we do find somebody vaping and we recover that vape, we will test that vape for THC. So we'll swab that vape, and if it has THC, we can then have that student drug test based on reasonable suspicion, etc. But at least we can determine whether there's any THC involved in any of the vapes that we do recover. Results of our drug tests. Again, the vast majority of all of our drug tests are negative. We do have, I think, 34 so far this semester that have been positive, and then one from a waiver standpoint. drug types, we use a 5-panel test when we test our students. That test involves opiates, cocaine, methamphetamine, THC or marijuana, and amphetamines. The vast majority, as you can see in the bottom chart, is THC related, with marijuana being legal in Michigan. It presents exceptional challenges here in our school corporation. So the vast majority of what we recover is related to THC or cannabis. On the amphetamine side, the majority of the random testing that we do, a lot of these students are ADHD or take some kind of ADHD medication. What happens is we send that off to our forensic lab, which we work with Beacon on, and they end up calling the parent, the doctor does, ensuring they have a prescription, and then that's forwarded back, whether it be positive or negative. So that's the panel that we use. The test cup and panel just gives us an initial indication. For us to confirm, we send all of these positive panel cases to Beacon Health for forensic lab tests. And then student groups that we have tested, you can see where they break out. Now, this is always challenging. It looks like football. Football is one of the largest groups, and that's typically one of the largest groups that is drawn. But cross-country girls and boys isn't. It's just the way the chips fall for whatever reason. The other thing is these students are involved in multiple sports. So if they're tested in the fall and they list, okay, what sports are you in? If girls cross country was the first one they listed, that's going to be there. So it's a little skewed as it relates to specifics, especially when they're involved in 4 or 5 different sports. But that's how the random drawing and reasonable suspicion testing has panned out. And then this year, we really tried to focus in the area of drug prevention. Student drug testing continuing. Officer Teeter over here to my left is our DARE officer, and he is nationally trained. He continues to work with our young students at our elementary schools, providing drug resistance education. And he could talk forever about it, but I'm not going to let you tonight. We'll just move on. But Tommy's a huge value to us and does a tremendous job along with both of our SROs. We also partnered with St. Joe Health Tobacco Prevention Program this year to provide some education as it relates to tobacco, and been working with St. Joe Health Systems in that regard. We've invited, and we did have Jermaine Galloway out to present in the fall at Penn High School as in combination with the Department of Education. He's an outstanding presenter. And again, we started the swab test swabs as well as fly sense vape detection this year at Penn High School. And then finally, I just want to say, my wife and/or I have been working in schools for over 30 years. And we started out in Southern Indiana. My wife was a school teacher. We moved to Indianapolis, where both of us were school administrators. In 2003, we moved to Penn-Harris-Madison School Corporation because of the schools and because of the community that we have here. We know, we've seen schools in the South, we've seen them in Central Indiana, and we've seen them in the North. And here in this community, I've chaired the St. Joe County Safe School Commission for 10 years. And there is no other school corporation in the state of Indiana that I would rather raise my children. And I did. All 3 of them graduated from Penn High School, and I have my 2 grandkids at Penn High School. I have a vested interest in maintaining safety at Penn High School, my grandkids, but also the safety of all of your children. So In an effort to be transparent, we're sharing this information. This is what has taken place in the first semester. We know that things can happen, but we try everything we can to try to prevent them and get ahead of them wherever possible. And partnering with our St. Joe County Police as SROs is a huge benefit to our school corporation. Be happy to answer any questions you
Thank
have.
you, Mr. Sager. I always hesitate to, in response to a presentation, say, that's great, what could we do better? I think sometimes it's an unfair way of addressing the presenter because there are so many things that you have done that are just simply extraordinary. The recognition that PHM has received for the quality of our safety initiatives is a great reflection on you, a great reflection on the administration, everything that you're doing. There are some things that jump out that are concerning. I do recognize, specifically when it comes to safety initiatives, safety revisions, and safety upgrades, the board is extremely reluctant to publicly discuss it because obviously we don't want those who would do ill to our students to know what is on our minds and what we might be considering implementing in the future. But bullying and self-harm really stand out. And I would encourage the administration. It occurs to me that it's been a while since we've had Dr. Sears in connection with Mr. Sager give us a presentation on what we're doing to reach out to students who are in need, students who are on the risk, having the risk of self-harm, so that we're brought up to speed with SEI as it pertains to safety and security. So I'd like to see that at some point in a very near school board meeting, along with a presentation on, again, what we're doing to try to reduce bullying, because the degree of bullying, the escalating degree of bullying obviously has a correlative effect on the number of students who are considering self-harm. I do also want to commend you very much for the Safe School Hotline. I know that you have been a consistent promoter of that. I am encouraged that people are actually utilizing it. There were years ago when we were curious as to whether people would utilize it. I am encouraged that people are utilizing it because ultimately we do want our students to be safe. We want people who are unsure about our student safety to know that there is an outlet that they can tap into to make sure that there are resources allocated to ensure that student safety. So with that in mind, I'd ask that of the administration. I also thank you, Mr. Sager, very much for this comprehensive safety update and for everything that you're doing.
I have a question. We've gone over with the FlySense, the protocol after it's triggered. Could you remind me what the protocol is and the steps that are taken when we get a non-negative test back for the drug testing? Does that go to coaches, parents, teachers? Like who is notified and what are the repercussions of that?
No, so we do random and we do a reasonable suspicion. So that's private information. That wouldn't be something that we would send out to parents, etc. Non-negative being positive.
Right. So yeah, when they're, I mean,
To their guardians.
when they,
Yeah. Okay.
when they test non-negative, what do we do? I know that you don't do anything when just to
Okay,
let
I
them know they were
misunderstood.
tested, they've
So
already done
sure,
that.
sure. So if they're non-negative, which it's a urine test
Right.
based on the 5-panel result, if it comes back showing non-negative or positive, which is the same thing, then that individual is addressed from a disciplinary standpoint. They're suspended, and we send that drug panel test on to Beacon for verification within 72 hours. Of course, each school is a little different. It depends on the circumstance and whether we find, the substance on them or whether it's just a random. Each situation is somewhat different and has to be evaluated as such. But yeah, I mean, it's a violation of the school code of conduct to be testing with any type of drug, especially of the panels that we have.
So parents are notified every
Yes.
time?
Yes, they
Okay.
should be, because it's a positive result. Now, again, they're notified, but it is later confirmed.
Right, right. It's not confirmed for that
Sometimes,
72 hours.
sometimes there are cases where the cup or the panel will show one thing and then the result will show something different.
And you can recall several years ago, we added the educational component for those students who are, making a choice such as using drugs or alcohol. There's an educational component that they have to fulfill as a condition for them returning for participation.
And a lot of that is all part of the
Yes.
waiver. We bring them
Like the
back on the
counseling?
waiver. Yeah.
What
I
if
hope
it's
that
just like they just find vape with just the nicotine or tobacco?
Well, that's a violation of school code of conduct, tobacco, so it's handled from a disciplinary standpoint in that capacity. It's like smoking in school.
Thank you.
Yes,
I
sir.
was looking through here and I didn't see that it was tested for nicotine.
No, the swab test
Are they,
is just for THC.
Oh, so in other words, if you
That's
random,
what we're
you
looking
random
for.
drug test somebody, it doesn't show if they're smoking or using nicotine.
No.
Okay.
No, we're not testing for that. If
Yeah,
we
just
find
checking,
it, if we find a vape on them, we're assuming that it's either nicotine based or it's THC based.
And I'll go with Chris. I'm really concerned about the bullying deal because that's like you mentioned, it's an issue that can escalates into a lot of times people who are bullied end up doing self harm, and suicide is something that's close to that. That's so, and 46%. That's almost half of the calls for that. So, is there any follow up? I mean, do you have any data or statistics that shows the age group of these bullying students that call in? And then what is done? I mean, if these kids report bullying, they obviously are reporting the students who are bullying them. And I'm wondering what kind of statistics or what kind of data we show, or any kind of consequences are dealt with or used with these students to maybe stop the bullying. Make people need to know it's not okay to bully.
Well, I do want to point out that our third-party security service, they will label, they'll put these calls in categories.
Okay.
And so these categories are harassment and bullying. So when you think of harassment, bullying, not all of them are directly bullying because there has to be certain criteria met to be actual bullying. So in looking at their description category, they're talking about harassment. It can include name calling, racial slurs, pinching, kicking, poking, throwing into lockers, bullying, grabbing inappropriate places, sexual touching, or verbalization. So that's the category of harassment, bullying. So our traditional thought of bullying is we should consider a little broader based on these numbers.
Does that include like cyberbullying too? Is that included in that, what you just said?
Sure.
Okay.
The cyber piece is only going to grow exponentially in the future, as we've seen in the last few years. That's how kids are communicating. And that's some of the things that we're seeing, and it makes it exceptionally difficult for all of us.
And just one other question, follow up. I mean, the bullying, this section or these statistics are 46%. Has it been that way all along? Most of your calls in are from bullying. Are they this high? Almost half of all your calls bullying.
Yeah, that's a good question. I'd be happy to run those
I'd like
numbers
to find
for
out
you.
about that. If that's a problem that continually persists, it seems to be something that we need to take a look at.
Yeah, I can take a look at as a whole. We started this program in 2014. And so I can look at the entire numbers at a whole and then provide that information to you so we can see exactly which categories are our top and bottom categories.
Yeah, that'd be great. I'd like to see how to follow up and what's actually done about it.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Well, this information was presented for informational purposes only tonight. Mr. Seger, as always, we thank you very much for everything that you do. Thank you for being here to present to the board, and we look forward to hearing from you again in the very near future.
Thank you very much.
Okay, we will now move on to the hearing of visitors. Do you want for the board to speak? That comes after the hearing of visitors.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought before, I'm sorry.
I've been made aware that there are a number of visitors who are in person and have joined us by our YouTube feed who would like to address the board. So let me read our general protocol for the hearing of visitors. At regular meetings, the public is invited to address the board on general topics under the hearing of visitors without registering. A time limit of 3 minutes shall be enforced for persons wishing to speak during the hearing of visitors. The board's attorney, Mr. Jeff Johnson, will keep time. He will audibly let you know as your time has expired. It is requested that names and addresses be stated at the beginning of such comments. Individuals may speak only once during this section of the agenda. Personnel issues are absolutely not to be addressed during open sessions of the board. Concerns about individual employees of the district should be brought to the superintendent or to his designee. The board does not respond to questions or comments posed during the hearing of visitors, and the board asks that you direct your comments to the board and not to other audience members. Before I call up our first audience member who's asked to address the board, I do, as a general matter, want to address an issue that has come to the board's attention within the last day. It has come to the board's attention that a number of parents have expressed very deep, very sincere concerns about certain instruction materials that have been used at the high school, namely a book authored by Sherman Alexie. I want you to know that the board is aware of your concerns. The board is working with the administration to address them. There is a policy in place. It is Board Policy 9130. That pertains to public complaints and concerns, and that particular policy governs instructional materials. The board is working with the administration to make sure that there is a clear, articulable procedure available for parents when objectionable instructional materials come to their attention, so that they know what the protocol is, so that they can opt out of their children having those materials that they find objectionable to be required reading for their particular students. So to the extent, hopefully, that might assuage some of the concerns that you have, I wanted to offer that up. And with that in mind, Mr. Dallas, welcome back.
All right. Good evening, Democrats, except for Mr. Garrett. Thank you, sir. Hope you all really enjoyed Martin Luther King Day, which was last Monday. I know I did. I did a lot of thought about his legacy, taught my children a lot about him, and wishful thinking, I know, but hopefully some of you also put some real thought into his legacy and what his message really meant. I mean, regarding his dream of a colorblind society. That's what he talked about. That was his message. It's imperative that his legacy lives on about fighting against equity / Jim Crow laws and his endless fight for equality. I say again, equality in the colorblindness society. I know this is the part where a lot of you will smile and nod and basically wait for my time to expire. We go through it every month before calling up the next angry parent. I get it. We all get it. We're done asking for the right things to be done. We're going to start demanding it. So be prepared, I guess, when there's a bill being thrown around in the Senate right now, in the Indiana Senate, they're going to allow parents to start coming in and observing what's going on in the classrooms. That's coming up. That's going to be coming up real soon. So when that happens, parents are going to be there. We're going to start seeing for ourselves what's going on. We're going to take our schools back with or without any of you. Every single month, the Band of Six continues the mental gymnastics of trying to convince parents that they know more about what's going on in the classrooms than the students who bring home this radicalized material and the teachers who defend giving it to them. Last month, I was assured after my speech that there are behind the scenes conversations going on about the teachers, the rogue teachers that give out these radicalized assignments, and they single out students based off of their race and ethnicity with some of their assignments.
1 minute remaining.
Timekeeper guy, thank you. So I've been waiting with bated breath to see the progress on this. Have you guys defined CRT yet? Has it been defined yet after all these months? I haven't heard nothing yet. After all these months of denial of what's going on in gaslighting, we still want to know. So we're still waiting. Finally, I'll end things with this. As we see the COVID cases are rising at school at the highest infection rates they've ever been so far, according to your own data. Why are we continuing to utilize the same strategy to flatten the curve, especially when the CDC just acknowledged the cloth masks are ineffective? They just did that last week. In the words of Joe Rogan, all a mask is a MAGA hat for Democrats. And the fact that you're still forcing our children to wear this symbol of your
3 minutes have
political
expired. Thank you, sir.
Well, thank you very much. I'll be back next week.
Joshua Tavernier. Did I pronounce your name correctly?
Yeah, that's fine. All right, so you said that there's going to be a policy that's going to be put in place for kids to opt out. Sorry, no policy is going to do. I mean, this should not be allowed. Mr. Thacker, you approve for curriculum throughout the school system. So that means you approve the curriculum that talks about underage drinking in this book, 14-year-old. It talks about the sexualization of women. And even better, let's talk about this, masturbation. Gentlemen of the board, do you guys masturbate? Just curious. Because according to this, it should not be private. It should be spoken about publicly. So I'd love to have a conversation with you publicly about your masturbation and how well you do it. Would you be drafted #1 overall? Wait, my bad. He says he'll be drafted #1 overall. So that means you will be 2, 3. What round? Are you that good? Let's talk about it. Ladies, I'm so sorry you're going to be uncomfortable about that. Does it upset you, ladies, that there's a book approved that sexualizes women? I mean, he literally talks about looking at a magazine of naked women and, well, he's stroking himself. Oh, Mr. Riley, directly to you. Would you like to answer it? I mean, you're the leader. You're the president of it. I know you're not going to answer anything. Have you considered your African-American students and how they feel about this book? And, you know, I'm going to go ahead. I wasn't going to say what it says, but I'm going to. Don't get me wrong. I hate this word. But it says right in this book. And tell you, just think about how this makes them feel. That Indians are proof that niggers fucked buffaloes. Are you guys okay with your black students reading that? I mean, Africa, you have Black History Month coming up next month, and yet you're
1 minute remaining.
Like that. If you're not comfortable discussing this as adults in this room with other adults, then how dare you make it okay for kids to try and feel comfortable discussing it or even reading about it, because it is not okay. No parent should ever be okay with sending their child to school to talk about masturbation or sexual things along that line. That's all there is to it. Thank you. That's for freshmen.
Thank you, sir. Mrs. Glassburn?
Dr. Thacker, members of the school board, is it the position of PHM to know the sexual preferences of minors? And I open specifically with that question because we now have multiple reports of teachers who have asked students to disclose protected information like their sexual identity without parental consent in class as part of assignments. And while I have previously pointed out that this is a violation of your own board policy 2416, Indiana Code, and the federal PPRA, what is most disturbing is that adults are asking this of minors in the first place.
So let me explain this for you. In order for a minor to have a sexual identity, they must first have a sexual preference. So stop asking the sexual preferences of minors. That's what groomers do. That's what sexual predators do. This is grooming behavior. Furthermore, what does it have to do with the education of students, parental consent or not? Those questions should never, ever be asked of minor children, especially not in school. So I have a resolution, and it's actually pretty simple. Every single teacher, staff member, administrator should be given the PHM board policy 2416. They must acknowledge it. They must sign it, stating that by signing it, they have read and they have understood this policy in its entirety. They must do this every single school year moving forward so that an educator can no longer claim ignorance of the policy like they are doing now. You talk about safety as one of your number one priorities when you put your masks on to discuss your COVID policies. So if safety is your number one priority, why are you stopping at nothing to make sure this garbage doesn't find its way to PHM? If you truly care about protecting our kids, protecting their innocence and their mind and the minds of these students, you would be just as proactive with doing everything in your power to protect these minor students as you are with your COVID policies. But I guess I should no longer expect too much, as it seems some of you have a self-serving mission, evident by the South Bend editorial written by Ms. Roach, endorsed by Mrs. Gates, all about protecting.
1 minute remaining.
How outrageous is it to make outrageous to make candidates have political affiliations next to their names at the polls? But where are the editorials about our kids, protecting our kids, how education is failing? So we have to bring interventionists just to bring them up to grade level. Where are those editorials? No, we just want to make sure no one knows if we're a Republican or a Democrat. That must be really, really important. And that's very frustrating as a parent to see. So I guess we at least know who you think you serve.
30 seconds.
Thank you, Mrs. Glassburn. Ryan Leader.
Hello, board. Ryan Leader, 55200 Jeffrey Drive, Mishawaka, Indiana. I'm here tonight to advocate for the protection of my daughter's innocence until the day she's not innocent anymore. Last week, she's also a freshman. Last week, she was assigned the same book that we're talking about. And after skimming through it out of curiosity as a parent, I just discovered some questionable concepts that could taint her idea of what sex could be or how nasty a man or female could be. I know that I have options of opting her out of this book, but I'm just glad I caught it in time. What if I wouldn't have? What if she'd been, would she have questions? The unlikelihood of her asking us those questions after being exposed probably wouldn't happen, especially if these kinds of ideas and concepts don't come from us. As parents, we know our kids are ready to, we know when they're ready to handle these realities. So the likelihood of her stumbling into porn to answer these questions is a reality. I've tried hardest to keep my kids away from pornography, so I'm assuming she doesn't really know what a man does when he masturbates or how it works. If she would have read this book, maybe she would have been really curious and needed questions answered. What are the mechanics of this? How does it work? How long does it last? Etc. Kids are supposed to be curious. These are healthy, honest questions. It's just unfortunate that these could be avenues towards porn. Our family, we view porn as something that's not healthy and that could damage future and present day relationships. There's a reason that pornography is compared to drug addiction. There are numerous studies of how many people watch porn. Some say 75% men and 30% women. I now question your process of selecting literature for our children. I know there's probably some process, but now you have another parent questioning your intent or lack of care for my child. I just ask in the name of diversity that you consider my perspective and views that I hold.
1 minute remaining.
Thank you, Mr. Leader. Mrs. Leader?
Thank you, President Riley, for addressing this issue. It actually started with my daughter. So for 10 months ago, I started showing up to board meetings, not because of personal experience, but because of other stuff that was going on at Penn. Now, this has become personal. Last Thursday, my 14-year-old innocent daughter was assigned this particular book, written by an author that was accused of sexual harassment in 2018 and has not denied it. Fortunately, my daughter had not read the book yet. All in the Name of Diversity attempted to expose life on an Indian reservation. You could have exposed my daughter without my consent to multiple sexual violence acts, sexual explicit scenes, masturbation, pornographic content, getting an erection while hugging a school counselor, frequent swearing, and using the N-word. I went to the teacher and the principal. I was told by the principal that they would get me the summary of the unit and overall goals by Monday. No apology, which seems to be consistent unless it's in the parameters of racism. What gives a teacher or school or board the right to expose my daughter to sexual concepts that we work hard to protect her from? Why does diversity perspectives get to be more important than exposing children to concepts that potentially they are too young to comprehend or issues that open the door to curiosity? Does PHM really want to have influence in possibly opening doors to pornography addiction or setting up teachers to discuss sexual issues that could potentially open them up for legal ramifications? This is just another example of teachers' lack of ability to put morality, common sense, parental consent, and protection of young minds as their highest goal. I also don't agree with ostracizing students by offering another book. These peers that are being exposed that can pass these same concepts on to my daughter. These are teenagers. The last thing they need are adults willingly giving them sexual content to pass around and discuss. The counter argument to removing books is something like this. Well, teenagers always have access to these things, so what's the big deal? Well, we
1
were
minute
very
remaining.
to limit what my child is exposed to and make sure that she is safe. I'm done with PHM using our children as the unconsenting subjects of progressive social experiments. It's time to be done with it. And I want to end with, this isn't the only book. I work with 4 other school districts around the area that are parent groups that have done all of this research. I have it all. I knew about this book because I'm a part of these groups. We haven't taken it on
30
because we haven't
seconds.
had time because we're dealing with other issues. Now it's time. 4 pages of books that are at Penn and the middle schools. And they're all the same. And they're being given to our students and given out in our libraries. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Leader. Tina Cartwright.
Mr. Riley, thank you so much for addressing that. I can only hope that we'll actually get an answer because a lot of times we ask questions and we get 0 answers from you guys. So I'll just dive right in. This is the excerpt from the book that we're talking about. I spend hours in the bathroom with a magazine that has 1,000 pictures of naked movie stars. Yes, that's right. I admit that I masturbate. I'm proud of it. I'm good at it. I'm ambidextrous. If there were a professional masturbators league, I'd get drafted #1 and make millions of dollars. And if God hadn't wanted us to masturbate, then God wouldn't have given us thumbs. So thank God for my thumbs. There's another excerpt from the book that I think Mr. Dallas mentioned. So I'm not going to mention that one because I don't like talking about this. I don't talk about this, so it's uncomfortable for me. I'm a 43-year-old woman, so I hope each and every one of you are uncomfortable discussing this. This is being given to 14-year-old children. 14-year-old children. So how do you think 14-year-old minor children feel reading this content aloud in class in front of their peers, male and female, as well as people in position of authority, their teachers? I've been coming to meetings, observing, and continue to hear you preach on and on about the safety of our children and how it is your utmost priority. How are you sitting there telling us how much you want to protect our children and let this type of garbage be a requirement for many freshman students? I'm at a loss for this. My daughter's 14. She could be reading this. It's absolute disgusting trash. So I'd like to know who's in charge of approving this type of stuff for our kids to read. I don't know, Ms. Short, is that you?
1 minute remaining.
I don't know. Maybe you can email me later since you can't answer me now. So thank you.
I have an 8th grader sitting right here going into high school. I'd
Yeah,
like to know if you guys are
hang on just a
uncomfortable
second,
with
hang on
this.
just a second.
I would.
Hang on. Ms. Cartwright, thank you very much for your comments. We appreciate that. I have picked the people who are addressing the board, who have signed up in the order in which they've signed up. Melissa Cadoti.
I see your concern. You can't even respond.
Hi, I'm Melissa Cadet. Thank you, President Riley, members of the board, Dr. Thacker, administrators for letting me talk. I'm Melissa Cadet. I live at 54838 Springfield Trace Drive in Osceola. I'm here tonight as an educator, mother, and member of the community. I'd like to begin to thank everyone involved that set up the COVID testing clinic. We're getting our staff and students tested and back into the classrooms in a quick, efficient way, which is nice to see. My students coming back. Secondly, I'd like to talk about the new Great Minds program called Geodes. I've used this program in my classroom and think that it is a great addition to the whole group reading foundations program. Geodes are used in small group instruction, and I'm able to differentiate from I'm able to differentiate depending on the needs of my students. So this is a great new program that we have adopted. As many of you know, K-2 teachers have been very busy this month, completing the middle of the year benchmark assessments. I've completed testing on my class and look. Yeah.
Could you hold on for a moment? Mr. Johnson, please stop for time. There is some background noise that distracts us from being able to hear the speakers. Every speaker deserves the same dignity and respect as the first speaker who came to speak before the board. So let's let the children be quiet and let the speaker have the platform. Mr. Johnson, please start your time again. Mrs. Kadat, the floor is yours, and I apologize.
Thank you. Okay, I've completed testing in my classroom and love looking at the data. I love seeing that my students are growing and making great progress. The foundations and Haggerty programs are working well and students enjoy using them as well. Finally, I would like to give a shout out to the middle school and high school teachers. I'm thankful that my sons have the opportunity to be involved in clubs, organizations, and athletics. As a mother, I know that it is important to be involved and have a sense of belonging. There is something for everyone to get involved in, from music, the arts, sports, ski club, where my son is tonight, even a medical club, yearbook, or morning gym, which my 6th grader enjoys going to the high school for morning gym, just to name a few. I encourage everyone to get involved, every student to get involved. When students are involved, they have a sense of belonging and a passion for something that interests them. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is this your first time presenting to the board?
Yes.
It'd be wonderful to see you. Thank you for everything you're doing.
Thank you.
Brian Ames? Mr. Brian Ames? Mr. Ames?
Yes.
Come on up, sir.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen of the board, and I appreciate the time to speak tonight, and I will be brief. I have an 11-year-old 6th grade daughter who came home with this book from the library this one summer. It shows two teen or early teen girls in their bathing suits jumping into the water, and I can see where she would be drawn to a book like this. She was reading it at the kitchen table, brought it to my wife's attention, some of the colorful language. So I took a spin through it. The themes of this book deal with where teen sex is alluded to, the possibility of pregnancy, the confrontation of the boy and the girl, him telling her to go to the doctor and prove it. And then she is drunk and found in the water, has to be rescued, which leads our two main characters to discuss whether or not she was trying to commit suicide. I'm very nervous up here. This is not what I typically do, but this kind of stuff is just very disturbing that my 6th grade daughter is reading this. So we brought it to the attention of the discovery principal. She put us off to the, or not put us off. She addressed it and turned this over to the librarian, who said that this was found in the young adult section of the library. I'm not aware that there are any adults at Discovery, young or otherwise. So, I mean, then she said, well, it's rated PG-13. Well, this book, I mean, it uses language, prick, penis.
1 minute
shit,
remaining.
Very multiple uses of the F word in its various forms. It's not PG-13. This book is one of the most confrontational books or disputed books by the American Library Association for sexual content, profanity. And this should not be available to boys and girls 6th, 7th,
30
8th grade.
seconds.
In high school maybe, but still, this is inappropriate. I'd like to see something done about it. I don't think it was done intentionally by the staff, but they need to know what's in these books and not just be looking at the cover. Thank you.
Mr. Ames, it takes a lot of courage for somebody to come in front of the school board and to reveal their thoughts about something like that. I appreciate you expressing the fact that at some point you felt anxious, but you know what? You did a really great job. I really appreciate your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.
Okay. In keeping with the fact that we have a number of registered speakers to the board, we'll now go to those who have joined us via our YouTube video feed. We'll ask those who have signed up to speak to the board who are watching via YouTube to, instead of simultaneously watch us through your YouTube video and through the Google Meet, please click off of your YouTube video and click into the Google Meet invitation that you have been sent. And the first person that we have is Kristen Valentino Deal.
Hello, can you hear me?
Hear you just fine. Thank you.
Great. Hi, thank you. My name is Dr. Kristen Valentino Deal. I live in Granger, and I'm a professor of psychology at Notre Dame, and I also have 3 children at PHM schools. Primarily, I'm here tonight to express my support for our teachers and administrators as professionals whom I respect. They've been working so hard to provide our children with the best education possible, and I can only imagine how disheartening it has been for them to hear the comments and complaints that have been vocalized at the last several board meetings. So to any teachers or administrators watching and listening, I want you to know that there are many, many families like mine who appreciate and support you. We value your professionalism and judgment in providing the best learning opportunities for our students. Related to this point, I think that the bills under consideration in our state legislature, specifically the House Bill 1131 and Senate Bill 167, are harmful in so many ways. First, I completely agree with the editorial written by our board members, Ms. Gates and Ms. Roach. These bills are trying to inject politics into our educational system, and we all need to unite to oppose the politicization of this space. If this bill was really about helping to select the most appropriate curricula, we'd be hearing about whether Mathia or Agile Mind are better math programs, because we all know that math achievement scores are the best predictors of later academic success. But that's not what's being debated, is it? Instead, the same people that are waving pocket constitutions are trying to censor books in our libraries. Second, at the heart of these bills is an attempt to control teachers and even hold them liable for going against the whims of parents' political preferences. I think it's a waste of time and effort. These bills will have no positive benefit for public education. Instead, I see them as being extremely harmful to the teaching profession. Literally nothing is worse for motivation than reducing teacher autonomy, challenging their competence, and attacking them personally. Now more than ever, we need to support our teachers so that they are motivated to continue in this profession. Our teachers and administration are more than competent to determine what should be taught in schools, and they already provide opportunities to hear and incorporate
1 minute remaining.
Parent feedback. Thank you. I also want to vocalize my support for the SEL curriculum that's being implemented in our schools. Dr. Sears has done an amazing job of pulling together important content and resources to support our students. I had the privilege of participating in the Superintendent's Advisory Council a couple of years ago, in part to see if, as a child clinical psychologist, I had any suggestions for improving these materials, and I could not have been more impressed. I encourage any parent who has concerns to look closely at the lessons. There is no legitimate reason to
30
exclude
seconds.
any topic from the curricula as planned. So in sum, thank you to our teachers and administrators and board members. I really support and applaud your efforts. Thank you.
Mrs. Deal, thank you very much. We really appreciate your kind words. We also appreciate you being with us tonight. Next up is Mr. Robert Glassburn. Good evening, Mr. Glassburn. I think you're on mute.
There we go. Can you hear me?
We can hear you well. Thank you.
Perfect. Well, I'm going to start with a few questions. If there are no capacity limits put on events such as concerts, early college academy, parent open houses, and athletic events such as basketball games, why are we having a capacity limit for the winter dance, the snowball? Why can these kids come to the same school with 3,500 students every day, flood the halls during passing periods and lunch, and all inhabit the same building for 7 hours a day, yet only 25% of those same students are able to attend the winter dance? Why was it that on the day you postponed the dance in the first place, on that same night, you held a basketball game in the same gym with more than 1,000 people in attendance? Was science and data that you all claim to follow used to determine that 1,001 people at a dance would make it unsafe, but 1,000 is perfectly safe? Look, I'm a numbers guy, and I would love to see any kind of data that would support that 1,000 exactly is the limit for safe environment for this dance. Please show me that based on the square footage of the venue, the air volume capacity, divide that by the number of students in attendance, and let me see how it amazingly enough showed that exactly 1,000 people could attend safely. Now, there have been many parents and residents of PHM who have shown up to voice concerns in person at board meetings and have sent numerous emails concerning regard many things going on at PHM. We have continually been brushed aside and not listened to. However, it is nice to see that there is one resident of PHM who you do listen to, or I should probably say hide behind. I would like to say I don't feel as though just because Dr. Fox happens to be on the St. Joe Health Board, that he should be listened to when he wants to make things up on the fly, like how many kids can attend this dance. At least most of the other parents who are here have done some actual research and have some data before they get up to talk, and have you all roll your eyes at us and not listen. Why can 3,500 come to school on Friday, but not Saturday night for a dance? What should I say to my daughter if she is number 1,001? And on a completely different note, this did not happen to my child. However, it could have, as they're in the PHM school system, and all of you seem to be okay with it. In the book that you were referencing prior to public comment, I don't care
1 minute remaining.
policy says. Why are you okay with having a book like this as part of the required curriculum? Again, this is the literature choice in a class required at PHM right now. Not hypothetical, not pulled out of some adult section at the library. Why is your response that according to policy blah, 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 you can opt out of the book if you want? It should not be there to be opted out of.
30 seconds.
Fathers and mothers, you cannot be okay with this, even if you sit on your throne as a school board member. Can you seriously look parents in the face and say that you are okay with having these books in your schools? There is no way you can do that with a good conscience. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Glassburn. We'll move on to Ellen Marks. Hello, Ellen. Ellen, we think you're on mute.
You're right, I'm on mute.
Welcome.
Thank you. Am I up now?
The floor is yours.
Oh, thank you. Okay. My name is Ellen Marks. I am the parent of a sophomore at Penn High School, and thank you for the opportunity to speak today. Sending our kids to school is an act of trust. We let go a little, and we trust their teachers to keep them safe as well as to teach them. But the past 2 years have been unbelievably difficult, and trust is harder. No matter how much we want our children to be in school, not only for their education, but their mental health and ours, we struggle to let go. We can't expect teachers to fix the trauma of the last 2 years. We're already asking them to risk illness in a pandemic, to teach kids who move in and out of quarantine, and to bear parents' anger about what our kids have lost in the last 2 years and what we're afraid they'll yet lose. Proposed legislation would give teachers less discretion about what they teach and how they teach it, in the guise of giving parents more control. Our teachers would have to teach different material to different students and censor not only what they teach, but their own empathy. Last year, my son read The Book Thief in his freshman English class. It's about a girl being fostered in Nazi Germany by a family that risks everything to protect Jews from death. It's beautifully written and powerful, and I watched his compassion build as he discussed it. Great books don't indoctrinate students. They expand their experience and help them build empathy for people with different lives and struggles. I worry that books like that will be legislated out of the classroom. And I worry that our kids will lose mentors and counselors if their teachers can't communicate freely. When our kids struggle, when they're bullied
1
or
minute
worried
remaining.
about a family member, or struggling with their academics, or fighting with their friends, teachers are often the only trusted adults our children are comfortable reaching out to for help. Nearly every adult I know remembers a teacher who helped them believe in themselves, who celebrated their talent or consoled them during loss. Legislators and some parents are trying to censor communications between teachers and students.
30
If
seconds.
they succeed, our kids will suffer yet another loss they can't afford. I stand with and believe in our teachers. Thank you so much for all that you are doing. Many of us really do appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Marks. We appreciate your comments. Next up is Cara Brooks. Mrs. Brooks, can you hear us okay?
Yes.
Good evening. Floor is yours.
Okay. I don't have a lot to say. My name is Cara Brooks. I live in Osceola. I have 4 children in PHM schools. I just wanted to speak really briefly in support of our teachers. As we all know, the last 2 years have been quite difficult for students to navigate, as well as everybody. I want to thank the teachers who have done everything in their power to make this period feel as normal as possible. Our teachers face unimaginable pressures daily, including the threat of illness and possible violence. They do their best to meet students' individual educational needs while keeping their eyes open for red flags. They challenge, they encourage, they work long hours and have to muster the energy at the end of the day to care for their own families. Recently, they've faced unprecedented criticism over what they're teaching and how they're teaching it. As a parent, I just want to say to our teachers that they have my support. I know that they are well trained and fully capable of performing their jobs, and they deserve the credit and respect that we would give any other professionals in their given fields. That's all. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. We appreciate you being with us. Nice to hear from you. Next up is George Bashura. Good evening, Mr. Bashura.
Good evening, President Riley, Dr. Thacker, and members of the Board of School Trustees. Meeting after meeting, parents come to the podium and address the issues within the district. Time after time, the parents' questions go unanswered for the most part and get frustrated. Last month, or the beginning of this month, one of the parents addressed you as overlords. Hearing the board addressed in that way was sad to hear. Parents are simply frustrated by the inaction of the Board of School Trustees and the administration. For a long time, I have asked the parents not to carry pitchforks and torches approach into the board meetings. It is getting harder and harder to ask them to trust in the process. Trying to manage the issues in a civil way, in my opinion, is the only way to proceed. But not engaging with the public is creating a negative environment. The critical race theory came up 2 meetings ago when Mr. Garrett brought it up for an added agenda item. There has still not been a response from Dr. Thacker or the Board of School Trustees as to how critical race theory is perceived. Dr. Thacker said in that presentation, in the playback of the video, that there was going to be a presentation made. I need to ask, where is it? Strengthen Our Schools PHM district has sent a letter to the Board of School Trustees and the administration as to how the district was doing to display the undertones of critical race theory. Since the summer meetings to talk about SEL and what the SEL will look like this year, the undertones of critical race theory have seeped into other subjects, like physical education and recently a biology class. The facade has once again changed on how diversity, equity, and inclusion is being introduced into our students' classrooms. How is this allowed by the administration, and why doesn't the Board of School Trustees act on these teachings when contacted by parents? On November
1 minute
8th,
remaining.
On November 8th, a consent agenda, item 6.06 was removed from the agenda. Dr. Sands and Dr. DeSotos were going to participate in a virtual professional development and other services for the sum of $150,000. What has happened to that line item? If my dollar value for the professional development has been incorrect, please let me know. I hope that this has not been buried. The triangle of success has the parents as the
30
foundation
seconds.
and connecting students and teachers. The administration and the Board of School Trustees are eroding the parental portion of the triangle of success. Parents are looking for transparency, leadership, communication, and accountability. Answer the parents' questions, and this is what they're looking for. And I do applaud the teachers for the ones that have taught the curriculum the way it's supposed to be and not teaching the political values. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bashura. Okay, we'll come back to those who are present with us in the boardroom. Anybody who has not spoken on this agenda item who would like to address the board? Okay.
My name is Brent Curtis. I have 2 children in the PHM schools. I come from a long line of educators in my family, grade school, high school, college level, as well as principals, board members. I have a very strong background, very strong frame of reference and sounding board when it comes to curricula and academia. It is a common belief that today's school system is failing to teach our kids basics like math and proper English. Statewide test scores over the last 10 years prove this. Failing to teach cursive writing. Some of our kids can't read the Constitution or the Gettysburg Address. They can't even sign their names when they get a job and have to cash a check. Our grandparents' 8th grade education exceeds today's high school diplomas. That's on you and that's on our teachers. And if I was a teacher, I'd be embarrassed by that. Failing to protect our children from politically based biases, racism, and other forms of discrimination. You fuel these feelings by trying to disguise them as CRT and diversity and inclusion. Any company or organization that has to tout its diversity inclusion principles does so because it has a history of exclusionary and elitist practices. My children don't need diversity and inclusion instruction. Why? Because we view everybody the same way. They're either good or bad, they're nice or they're mean. We get along with them or they don't. It has nothing to do with anything except that person's character and personality, and it's that simple. Instead of hiring diversity and inclusion staff, I propose you hire a decency and common sense staff. Install a decency and common sense curriculum. We'd all be better off. I challenge the board to demand improvements and make changes. Respond to every issue presented to you. Isn't that why you invite parents to come here? You want to hear from them? Well, guess what? Parents want to hear from you too. And that's not about communicating votes and mandates or rules and restrictions. It's about
1
having
minute
a
remaining.
dialogue on how to best teach our kids and prove and reassure parents that their children are in good hands. Voicing our concerns is a waste of time if it falls on deaf ears and there's no response to each and every one. If that makes you comfortable or uncomfortable, good. It should. Failure to respond shows a clear disregard for our concerns and for our children's well-being. You say you hear us. If that's true,
30 seconds.
Take action and prove that you're listening.
Thank you, Mr. Curtis. Anybody else present in the boardroom? Come on up.
Hi, my name is Christy Witt, live in Granger. Good evening, President Riley, Dr. Thacker, and board. At the meeting in December, someone in this room stated that teachers felt they weren't getting the resources they need because of direct distractions on CRT and masks. But since we're still on that hamster wheel, let's go there. A new report found a dramatic shift in teachers' unions' priorities, including an increase in campaign spending and internal resolutions focused more on social and political issues than education. The Government Accountability Institute looked at the AFT and NEA. Head of NEA, Lily Escalon Garcia, states the core business is no longer about pensions and healthcare for teachers, but instead for social activism and political efforts. Maybe this is why they feel empowered. All teachers are to be given grace for the overwhelming pressures bestowed upon them the last 2 years, but it's still not their job to tell our kids how to feel versus teaching critical thinking. Actually, board, your closed door meeting in June 2020 may be the catalyst to this debacle. American exceptionalism was traded for a woke, divisive, insidious agenda. Teachers can no longer plead ignorance of the inappropriate content in the classroom or their building. Some are violating laws and policies from 6 ways to Sunday and will continue to be met with resistance. We aren't going away. As for masks, you claim your hands are cuffed. You blame Holcomb, CDC, Beacon, our dictatorial health department. Holcomb's assistant, Kristen, has told me on many occasions, these are just recommendations. The CDC has now said cloth masks don't work. That's your cue to stop the charade. Elkhart, Warsaw, Jimtown, all optional. Southwest Allen County schools in Fort Wayne been made mask optional the entire year, along with Edwardsburg. Northwest Allen County just went optional after Christmas. Elkhart Christian, Granger Christian, Trinity, all optional. If you cared enough about the social and emotional well-being, you'd call these superintendents and see how they're surviving. Today on the Indiana School Board, Penn has 95 students that have tested positive. Warsaw, 30, in the rest of the schools I announced their mask optional. Warsaw, 32, Carroll, 6, Homestead, 100, Elkhart, 127. Mr. Seeger may agree that the real pandemic for these kids is mental health.
1 minute remaining.
Also, yeah, so grabbing at the bit here with ESSER 1, 2, and 3 in the American Rescue Plan make you look like tyrannical and egregious overreach on kids from 8 to 5 only is just embarrassing for PHM. God forbid these funds go away. If COVID is so deadly, why aren't there OSHA bins all around the school for disposing of dirty masks? If any board members have recently worn masks religiously, yet still got COVID, please implore Dr. Thacker to give back the money tied to this farce.
30
History
seconds.
will judge you for allowing unconstitutional and experimental masking on kids for almost 2 years. We're going on 2 years. Board members, if your kids aren't in the school system or you're thinking about moving them to another school system, you've appeared to given up on us. Sadly, you have no skin in the game. Mr. Towner even reminisced tonight about seeing smiles. Your glazed eyes peering over your mask won't deter us from fighting for the kids and wanting to see their smiles again. It's not a high bar. Please raise the bar.
3 minutes have expired. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am. Anybody else? Come on in.
Thank you for letting us speak tonight. My name's Andrea Hartstein. I live at 50804 Partridge Woods in Granger. And I have 3 kids in the system. One's a 6th grader at Discovery, and she has a library full of these kinds of things. I just want to say that this goes beyond politics. This is beyond politics. You guys, the things that my kid has access to is like, I know you think that maybe, I don't know if you think, I can't assume that. People assume the kids have access to stuff in other places. Well, you know what? My kid doesn't know what the stuff is yet. She doesn't know what it is. And now she knows what some things are. And I just want to say, it's not about censorship, it's about age appropriateness. If the librarian's response is that it's because like it's the young adult section, it should be PG-13. When you look up what's allowed in a PG-13 movie, you can say one F word or like a curse word. Nothing can be about sexual anything. So all of these books fall under rated R for sure. Like these are rated R books. These are not PG-13 books. If you're going by those standards, if that's what we're looking at. And if we're not going by those standards, then why not have 50 Shades of Grey? Let's put that in the library. Let's find other books that other adults think are just fantastic pieces of literature, and let's put those in there. This book with the Indian, I've heard a teacher say, not necessarily in Penn, but say, have you read the book? It was such a good story though. And I'm telling you, my perception of this with dealing with an 11-year-old kid, it could be the greatest piece of literature. And it just, that little section just ruins the whole thing, because now we're diving into something, you're unlocking something in her head and her heart that she has never been exposed to before. And it's like, you're giving her a milkshake and you're putting a little bit of poop inside it and you're stirring it all up.
1 minute remaining.
What we're experiencing. I went to Penn. We read the Scarlet Letter. You had to have a permission slip to read the Scarlet Letter. And my parents let me read it. And they knew I was reading it. And so then when I was home, I could ask them questions, things that I was embarrassed to ask about in class in front of the boys. I could ask about it with my mom. And we also read German, or we read a lot of German. We read Harry Potter in German class. My parents didn't want me to read Harry Potter. So
30 seconds remaining.
They were aware of it and they asked for an alternative book. What's happening here is we're not even aware of it. Like, let us at least just have the permission slip so we can say, no, we want to opt our kids out. We're finding it out this way, so it feels very deceptive, and it feels like, what else are they hiding and trying to influence my kids with? Does that make sense? So that's my heart, and I just thank you for hearing. We're not trying to censor books, we're trying to have age appropriateness. Thank you.
Mrs. Hartstein.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much for coming tonight, and thank you for sharing your thoughts with us. I really appreciate you doing that.
Thank you for listening. I appreciate it.
Anybody else?
Hi, I'm Angel Curtis. I'm at 5061 Mercury Drive in Granger. Thank you for letting me speak. I had a speech, but like Mrs. Hartstein, I think I'll just talk from my heart for just a second. I have 2 students at PHM. I have one at Discovery and I have one at Penn. Last year, my daughter was in 9th grade and she had that book and she was on virtual. And I do not condone cheating whatsoever, but thank God Almighty for Cliff Notes, because she told me I didn't even read the book. I just found out about this book just a couple weeks ago, maybe 10 days ago. And I went to my daughter and I said, did you read this book? And she said, Mom, I'm so sorry. I did the Cliff Notes. I didn't even read the book. I couldn't even punish her. I was so grateful. I mean, I was grateful that she did not read that book. I can't imagine having to explain what went on in that book, or having my husband to explain to my then 15-year-old daughter the things that were in that book. And that's really scary. Here's something else. Just last week, my daughter's in 10th grade. She had a permission slip for a health class because they were going to talk about some things, maybe reproductive things, maybe, things that teenagers talk about, whatever. She had that sent home and we had to sign a permission slip. That's nothing compared to what she could have been exposed to. So I really would encourage you. I also want to say one more thing. Some stuff has been said about the teachers. The teachers are fabulous. No one is against the teachers. No one is against the board. No one is against the administrators, nothing like that. We're grateful, but we would just like you to hear us. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Curtis. Appreciate that. Anybody else? Yeah. Ms. Freeland?
Hello, thank you, President Riley. Oh, gotta put my glasses on. Dr. Thacker, administrators, and the board. I'm Shelley Treeley, 429 Calhoun. I've spent the last 35 years teaching all of my service in Title I schools at PHM. As you know, it's late January, and along with being downright frigid outside, it's also a scary time for third grade teachers in Indiana. More so than ever for this group of teachers whose students have only had one full year in a brick and mortar. 3/4 of their school years have been rocked to the core by COVID. 3/4 of their time has been masked. 3/4 has been without experiences needed to help them better understand the world. I'm not sure how you spent yesterday. I heard there was some pigskin flying around. I don't know. I spent time poring over the latest results on reading informational text and literature for our third graders. Regardless of COVID and its devastating impact, this group is still accountable for standardized testing. I know there are those who enjoy nitpicking every single thing they think teachers are doing wrong. They relish in finding our faults. I don't have the time nor would I want to busy myself with that agenda. Rather, my days are filled with teaching children how to read or at a desk looking at the data so I can make informed decisions on how I can best prepare 60+ students to decode passages and understand their meanings. It saddens me deeply to know that there are many who want to just yammer as to what they perceive teachers are doing wrong. Please don't believe everything you read and hear. We're doing great things at Moran. We're teaching Indiana academic standards so our students are prepared for what lies ahead. President Riley and Dr. Thacker, I assure you, we're doing the jobs you hired us to do. I also want to take a minute and speak about my granddaughter, who's in your trust. She's an elementary student within PHM. I don't think it's going to be a surprise to anyone sitting at the table to know what the passion of a grandmother can accomplish. We're tough cookies. We take our role seriously when we're blessed with that club membership. This is what I want for my granddaughter. I want her to recognize her
1 minute
power
remaining.
and her responsibility to be intentional in her decision-making. I want her to embrace her differences and those of her friends and find strength in their connectedness. I want her to express joy, gratitude, and optimism through her words, her actions, and her thoughts. I want her physical and emotional and spiritual health to be nurtured. I want her to lead with an open heart and assume positive intent, even when the world tries to drag her down. And you know what else I want?
30 seconds.
When things get tough, I want her to stand up for herself and others. I recognize some don't want that for their children, but this grandma, I do. So on a personal note, I want to thank the administration and the Board of Trustees for allowing schools to be sites for girls on the run. Those 6 statements are core values of the program. There will be times in my granddaughter's life where I or her parents won't be around when she's faced to make tough choices. I want her to
3
have
minutes
the
have expired. Thank you, ma'am.
necessary that she needs to make the best decisions she can. The values and lessons of Girls on the Run will help equip her. Thank you.
Well, Ms. Treeley, you said something about you hope that I recognize and Dr. Thacker recognize the great things that are going on at Moran. The entire board and the entire administration recognizes it. Thank you so much for everything that you're doing. Deeply, deeply appreciate you. Anybody else? Ms. Rutten?
Good night. That's an introductory statement.
I picked up on it.
Sorry, bad humor. President Riley, Dr. Thacker, the board. My name is Andy Rutten. I own property at 55304 Cedar Trail, just down the road. And I just wanted to say a couple of quick things. I'm encouraged by the change of having the hearing of visitors before the board discussion. I'm hopeful that this will help the board to be able to respond, quickly, even in almost real time to the individual parent concerns. Parents don't always agree what's best for kids. For some parents, it's really appropriate to have age-appropriate instruction. You have very young kids, and you have high schoolers, seniors who are almost adults. I'm confused. Some of the parent comments tonight, it's almost like some parents want their kids exposed to the obscenity of smut and foul language. Is that being unfair? Well, you know, there's been a lot of unfair things said tonight. So I guess I feel that. I feel like some parents don't mind their kids being exposed to stuff that makes me blush. Final thought, a request. When the board time keeps for the hearing of visitors, when the timekeeper is attending virtually, if possible, can that duty be delegated to somebody who is in person, so that as in normal meetings, it's a subtle visual cue rather than a very loud verbal distraction for as the time starts winding down. So I'm actually trying to draw this out a little bit to see if Mr. Johnson will say that, but I guess that's not appropriate. So thanks for hearing what I had to say.
Thank you, Mr. Rutten. Good to see you. Anybody
One
else?
Good evening. Even though things are very tense here, we can all still laugh. So let's kind of keep that in mind. Parents have had concerns. We've had concerns for a very long time. We keep coming to the board. We came to the board about critical race theory. We've come to the board about masks. They don't work. We've come about problems with books previously. We've come to you before these things have been known by the school board. Everything we said is true. We shouldn't be being ignored. We're trying to help. Instead, like was referenced before, we were told that, you know, the CRT and math stuff kind of gets in the way and distracts from teachers getting the things they need. That's a really tone deaf statement, because us as parents don't feel that way. We have concerns and we're coming to the board because administration doesn't answer us. It's one thing I've noticed in reading, you know, previous board documents from the viral bullying incident a couple of years ago. The one thing the parents said, including Mrs. Roach's husband in that news article, was administration doesn't listen. The alumni from 2020, administration doesn't listen. Our group, the administration doesn't listen. We don't all agree, but we agree on this. The administration does not listen to us. We don't get phone calls back. We don't get our concerns answered. And this is what happens. So we have critical race theory praxis going on in the school. You saw that. You've admitted it. You don't know what it is. No updates. Thank goodness for Mr. Garrett. Hopefully he's holding your feet to the fire. Don't wait for Indiana. Indiana IDOE is full of crap that they recommend. Masks. Why are you wearing cloth masks? Where's your N95s? This is ridiculous. At some point, at least we see a couple surgical masks, which are a little bit better. But if you're going to play this way, we should at least, you know, look like we're paying attention. And these unacceptable books in the classrooms. A policy for us to fill out what sections
1 minute
are
remaining.
unacceptable. It doesn't get anywhere. We'll review the book. Maybe we'll take it off, maybe we won't. Why don't we go ahead and we'll remove your child from this, but we're gonna let all the other students have to read this. It's not acceptable. Surely there's something better that PHM can be doing. This isn't excellence. This is trash. My 13-year-old girls in 8th grade were given a poetry assignment that asked for part, not only their religion and everything else,
30
you know,
seconds.
all the 2419 policy thing. They wanted to know sexual orientation. My 13-year-old twins, their sexual orientation. Because he wanted to help, he wanted this design, as it was designed to help students explore and express parts of their identity. I don't need an 8th grade English teacher helping my child explore the parts of their sexual orientation. It's ridiculous. At least Mr. Milford did something
3
about it.
minutes
And
have
he sent
expired.
out
Thank
that
you, ma'am.
policy to every single teacher in Grissom. Because you know why? The teachers don't know about this policy. If we care about student safety, we care about their safety regarding their privacy. They are too young to understand how letting that information out will affect them in the future. And it is our job to protect them for this, just like you do bullying, just like you do you know, online.
3 minutes have expired, ma'am. Thank you.
I appreciate it. I wanted to let you finish your sentence, but we need to wrap it up.
Okay,
3
I
minutes
don't
have
necessarily need
expired.
that. Okay, thank you, Mr. Riley.
Anybody else? Mrs. Bradbury, anybody else wanting to address the board via a Google Meet invite?
There's no one else signed up on.
Okay, well, sincerely appreciate everybody who has addressed the board tonight. And we will move on to our next item on the agenda, which is our board reports and requests. Board members, do you have anything to report or request?
I think it would be a good idea to probably have somebody in person. I was actually thinking the same thing. So could we look into having somebody who's in the board meeting holding up those cards
For the 3 minutes.
for the 3 minutes?
We can look into that.
I was thinking the same thing. It can be disruptive when somebody's prepared their remarks. Thank you, Mr. Rutten, for bringing that out.
Yeah, tonight, the parents took away what I was gonna say. But first of all, I'd like to ask Mr. Hawkins, last board meeting, I asked if you could provide information on the $150,000 appropriation for professional development. You remember I'd asked about where that's being appropriated for, what it's being looked at to be spent for at this point. So in other words, I don't want to have something come up later on that we're not prepared for and may be spent in an area that we might not consider, or I might not consider, other people may not consider appropriate. So if I could get that, if you have it, if you don't have it at this point, you can just email it to me, but I would like to know where we're looking to spend $150,000 on professional development, okay? I think I did ask you for that last week, didn't I, or last board meeting? Okay. Secondly, I was gonna follow up with the idea, because, you know, I've been on this CRT thing since August. And a couple of board meetings ago, I'd asked about a vote or a discussion or a vote from the board to support the Indiana Department of Education's position on CRT. But for some reason, there was apparently no one, I couldn't get a second. And then went into some discussion later on about the fact we didn't have a definition. Well, I know, to me, if it looks like a duck, walks like a duck, and quacks like a duck, it probably is a duck. So I don't think there's anyone in this room who does not know what CRT looks like and is trying to be taught in the classroom. But if we need a specific definition, maybe, you know, if we need to have a committee to come up with that, I'd like to volunteer to be on that committee. I'll head that committee, get some people together so we can come up with a definition, and then the board can actually look at it and decide, okay, Garrett, you're crazy, we don't agree with you at all, or maybe we can decide, say, hey, this is a good idea, let's get behind this. But this is an issue that's not going away, and we need to deal with it and quit kicking the can down the road. We need to either say we support the Indiana Department of Education, we do not agree with CRT, we will not teach CRT, we will not allow it to be taught in our schools, or we need to say we're going to let it go. So I'd like to see us take a stand on that one way or the other. And I think every board member needs to tell the public how they feel. That's my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Roach.
Yeah.
Mrs. Roach.
I have something I'd like to add. Last week, we celebrated the birthday of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, an American who truly embraced the call of the preamble of the Constitution to form a more perfect union and establish justice. My very first teaching job straight out of college was at a school that was listed on the U.S. Register of Historic Places because Dr. King and the marchers that had started in Selma were offered refuge in my school. And in fact, Dr. King spent the night in the school's library. So I typically celebrate Dr. King's birthday with fond memories of my time as a young teacher in Montgomery, Alabama. I do acts of service because it's a national day of service. And I say prayers of thanksgiving for Americans like Dr. King, whose wisdom and courage and thirst for justice
help these United States become a more perfect union. But this Martin Luther King Day, I had a very troubled heart, which is why I'm speaking tonight. Just before the national holiday, I had received a call from a PHM teacher who informed me that for the first time in her teaching career, she would not be teaching a lesson on Dr. King, nor were several of her colleagues. She told me on the phone that evening that she was afraid to. The teacher had watched many of these school board meetings. She'd listened to public comments, and she'd followed a lot of online activities. And she informed me that members of our community on social media had asked other people in this community to betray the names of teachers who dared talk about race in their classrooms. She had seen social media posts by members of our community in all capital letters that read, "We want teachers' names. Get me the names of teachers." She told me that she was aware of other teachers whose university term papers were publicly shared with a tone of gotcha. She informed me that students were videotaping teachers in class, and the videos were then edited and posted online. She mentioned that her principal had repeatedly been cussed out on the telephone throughout the year, and that there were websites that exist scouring teachers' social media feeds as if it's a sin for them to believe in causes that are dear to their heart. It was a conversation I'll never forget. It was gut-wrenching, and she concluded it with something like this. It's not an exact quote, I can't remember, but she said, "I'm just not sure I want to be a teacher in Indiana anymore. Not in these times when everyone seems to assume bad intentions out of us." There's a lot to unpack from this conversation, which is why I share it. I don't very often get calls from teachers, and certainly not like this one. And I have the voice of Dr. King in my head right now, who said, in the end, we'll remember not the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends. And so tonight I'd like to speak up in defense, in solidarity with our teachers, our administrators, and about their crucial work in service to our kids. Our teachers did not go into this profession to make the big bucks, right, Jim?
Exactly.
Nor to brainwash students with political ideologies. If our teachers wanted to fight the culture wars, I think they would have become politicians. Of course, our teachers have diverse views. They have diverse lived experiences. But our teachers come from our community. They're our neighbors. They're our friends. And I'm sure that some lean left, and I know that some lean right. And our students benefit for having all of them. They've done a heroic job educating our children during this awful pandemic, often having to reinvent teaching and learning on the fly. They are not out to shame children or corrupt them. They're out to help them thrive and navigate the modern world. And so, teachers, I speak to you now. I am so sorry that I didn't speak publicly in your defense earlier. I'm sorry so many of you feel beleaguered when you should feel gratitude for being the essential workers that you are and for being a wonderful influence in your own diversity on our students. PHM teachers, support staff, bus drivers, food service workers, nurses, custodial staff, leadership, all of you. Thank you for your important work. I believe in your good intentions. On the topic of not teaching lessons about Martin Luther King, and more broadly about having diversity, equity, and inclusion discussions. I can understand how this tense climate we're in can induce fear and anxiety. In addition to the intimidating tone online, please know that the resolution this board passed in 2020, that it stands and it means something. This board resolved to eradicate racism and racial injustice within the PHM School Corporation. And that means we need to talk about race. We need to be able to talk about race, to learn about diverse cultures and worldviews, and to listen to each other share our lived experiences and perspectives. Nothing can be changed until we're willing to face it. Our students need to learn to read about and debate and consider big ideas, sometimes controversial ideas. It's what engages kids, teaches them to think for themselves. So how do I think we should do this? Going back to the resolution that was adopted, by fostering a safe, healthy, and inclusive learning environment to ensure that all are treated with dignity and respect, and to do our part to bring about positive change and discrimination and secure equality for all. PHM teachers, talking about racial justice is important. Help our students embrace their call to form a more perfect union. Help them learn about the values of this great nation. Liberty and justice for all. Teach them the full history of America, the moments when we lived up to our ideals and served as a beacon on the hill for the world, and the painful challenges with their long-standing consequences that have prompted us to wrestle with who we are and to reflect on if we're fully living up to our foundational values yet. We're going to turn our nation over to these kids. And our teachers are preparing them well, exceptionally well. If we weren't teaching the Indiana standards expertly, if our teachers were distracted by culture wars, our students would not be doing so well on iLearn and so many other measures of learning. They wouldn't be so engaged in clubs and sports, in the arts, and community service. Our students are excelling in so many ways. Our schools are a community good. We need to support and strengthen them. Our teachers, our administrators, we have to remember that they're our neighbors. They're good people doing good work, the important work of building nurturing relationships, teaching with rigor, and very importantly, making learning relevant to the lives of these children. And so I ask all of them to keep up their good work and to trust that this board is committed to strengthening and sustaining their excellence. And know, trust, that we listen attentively and think deeply about every comment that we hear at these school board meetings. And trust that we will do this work of educating our children as a community, as proud, thoughtful, grateful Americans, to borrow the beautiful words of President Lincoln, upon whose shoulders so many great Americans like Dr. King stood. This is very important. With malice towards none, and charity for all. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Roach, very much.
That was condescending. I'm sorry. It was every single parent back here. That was condescending to us.
Well, Mrs. Leader, this is the board reports and request time now. The opportunity for the public to speak to the board has expired. Are there other board members who have reports and requests? Mr. McCullough.
I just wanted, one thing I forgot to cover last board meeting that I wanted to point out was December 15th. I want to thank Dr. Short for sending out the memo, just reminding all the principals and all the schools on the memo of 2416, and specifically with the surveys and how that has to be approved. We should have covered that last time, but forgot to mention it. So thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. McCullough. Any other board reports or requests?
We did have a request.
Yes, Mr. Turnbull.
I know originally we were going to have a presentation tonight from ESS on sub outsourcing. I had a number of questions related to that. I think we all know that making sure that we have appropriate staff and the challenge that teachers are facing, our building principals and administrators, that's a really big challenge right now, and making sure we have enough bodies in the building every single day. And I know they're spending a lot of time on that. So I know that finding a solution towards improving our subs is really important. I would love to see some other information on other potential solutions. My biggest thought or question would be, and I don't know how it works currently, so I guess some education around it would be lovely, but is the possibility of hiring someone within our own HR department whose sole responsibility would be on subs and substitutes and trying to engage that pool that we have and maintain them, and then just what that costing would be, also on what the costing might be around increasing our sub hourly rates or daily rates, because I would like to understand the options available to us. So that would be a request if that comes back. I hope that it does come back, because I think we all would agree that is a really important item. But it was something that I was hoping to get more information around.
Thank you, Mr. Turnwell. Yes, I think Dr. Thacker and I both received the questions that you had raised about the proposed contract earlier today. They were excellent questions. I think the administration is going to prepare some responses to them as they evaluate the substitutes needs. So thank you very much for raising that. Ms. Gates.
I noticed that Mr. Dallas isn't here anymore, but I would like to address that I feel like some of us may have been misrepresented by some of his words tonight, and like to clarify that, as well as my intent behind, and Claire and I's intent behind that letter is that when I started serving on this board, in fact, I was like encouraged by somebody who does not share my political views to get more involved, because at the time when we sat up here and said we were for the students in our community and for the teachers and for the families, it didn't really matter if we had a D or R behind our name. It wasn't an issue. That has changed in the last 2 years. It's become an issue. And I really would like to say I don't like what it has done to the board. And it might be very naive of me to think that people would take the time to get to know the people running in these roles. But if I were running for this position again and anybody asked me what my party affiliation is, I would answer them. I would answer them on not only what my party affiliation is, but even where I stand on specific issues that might not be related to that party affiliation. It's the naive hope that we could leave less of just that out of it and more of like what's best for the kids and for the teachers and just for our community. So I feel like in recent times too, just because I vote Republican, I'm looking at a lot of our leaders who vote Republican, and I do not I'm like, why do we have these rules in Indiana where we're led by a Republican? So I don't think that necessarily tells us what it even used to tell us about conservatives and liberals. And so leaving as much of that out of here and deciding what was best for the students is our hope. And just not having to navigate that party system that also will change who can come into these positions and make it more costly and make that something that's only available to even less people. So there's a lot of factors involved in that, and people's motivation behind running for those roles. And it's a lot to explain, but I had given it a lot of thought. But I also just wanted to tell Mr. Ross. But it's not to hide where we stand. It's actually, in my hope, it was to have people look even further beyond that. And I was thinking about it from our point of view when we don't usually have, like Mr. Garrett brought up, well, if there's 10 people running, that would be one really helpful piece. And I said, I was like, well, yeah, that hasn't really happened since I've ever voted around here. And
Yeah,
you know what, that's probably
I
about
have
to change.
I have to beg people to come out next time.
Yeah, but anyways, I also want to say that I have a huge problem with some of the stuff that was read tonight and is in the books, and I am voicing that, but that makes me uncomfortable. Makes me very uncomfortable as somebody who had 2 daughters who graduated, were young for freshmen, and makes me even more uncomfortable. So
I have a freshman granddaughter. I know what you're talking
I'm
about.
just going to say that does make me uncomfortable. I'm willing to listen and learn. I'm not about banning books. I am about age appropriateness as well.
Thank you, Mrs. Gates. Okay. Well, we'll close the board reports and requests, and we'll move on to announcements. Next regular meeting of the Penn-Harris-Madison Board of School Trustees will convene Monday, February the 14th, 2022 at 7 p.m. With that said, there's no further business before the board. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor vote aye.
Aye.
Any opposed vote nay. Motion carries by a vote of 7-0, and we are adjourned at 10:20 p.m.